Hello, hello. How are we, everyone? I'll pretend that I was not just speaking to myself for a couple of minutes because I hadn't worked out how to turn on the stream. Hello, hello. Here I am. Good. All right, well, we've got an interesting one today. We're going to be speaking with Robbie Lockie, who is the founder of Plant-Based News. And he's written something about FarmKind, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And he has a few cool new projects going on, which we'll discuss as well. I've not yet read, what he has written about FarmKind, so I'm going to do that. So that we can discuss it a little bit. But yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff that he's been working on that we're going to talk about as well. So let's see. This is written a few days ago. It's called Why Veganuary Matters More Than Ever, a response to the Forget Veganuary campaign. I've reserved comment on this topic. I've reserved comment for a while on this topic because I wanted to understand the perspectives of everyone involved. But as we reflect on another Veganuary with 25.8 million global participants in 2025, a controversy emerged that garnered a lot of attention. FarmKind's Forget Veganuary campaign suggested we should skip dietary change and instead donate to animal charities to offset our meat consumption. While I respect the important work organisations like the Humane League do to improve conditions for farmed animals, this approach risks misunderstanding how transformative movements succeed, and more importantly, risks weakening one of the movement's most proven engines of change, shifting what people eat, not just what they fund. I believe Veganuary works despite what the media tells you. Let's begin with what matters: impact. Veganuary has achieved remarkable success in helping people understand what it means to live without animal products. This includes both my parents, who are in their late 60s and are now passionate, ethical vegans. For millions, it's the first meaningful encounter with the possibility of a meat-free life. Veganuary reports that 81% of participants said they reduced their animal product intake by at least half, and that over a quarter of participants stayed vegan after Veganuary 2024. But I think it's important to be upfront about what happens after the first spark. Drop-off is real, and people often cycle in and out of dietary change, which isn't an argument to abandon dietary change, but an argument to build better support, better community, and better repeat attempt pathways. Yeah, I think that all makes sense. That would all be positive progress. This is the original of that graph I showed yesterday, which I posted. I zoomed in a little bit on the meat-free diets only, just to show a bit more of the difference there. And added the data labels as well, which is always helpful. But here's where we are in the UK right now. Finder's latest UK diet survey, 2,000 adults in Great Britain, 12th to the 5th of December 2025, with a margin of error of 2.2%. Estimates that 3.1% of UK adults are already vegan, and 3.2% plan to go vegan in 2026. Finder also reports that 14% of the UK population was meat-free at the end of 2025, up from 12% at the end of 2024. A rebound, yes, but also a reminder that progress can be fragile and slower than many of us wish. This isn't just personal, it's structural. Dietary change is not only a private lifestyle choice, it's a market signal. When enough people buy differently, retailers stock differently, brands reformulate, menus change, and entire categories become normal. On the environmental side, the scale of the opportunity is huge. Our World in Data summarises research suggesting that if everyone shifted to a plant-based diet, global agricultural land use could fall 75%. That's not perfect being the enemy of good, that's a transformation that diet change uniquely pulls. The fatal flaw in the offsetting logic. First, a point of agreement. Donations to highly effective charities can absolutely reduce suffering and help drive systemic change. That's why many advocates do both. The issue is the offset framing when it becomes a substitute for reducing harm at source. This mirrors the logic of carbon offsetting when it's used to perpetuate business as usual. A dynamic critics of offsetting warn can deter, or delay the direct action we usually need. Yeah, so it's like a moral licensing kind of concern, which a lot of people have expressed. But here's where we actually stand. The problem isn't that every offset project is meaningless in every context. The problem is that offsetting is routinely used as a permission structure, a way to keep doing the harm while claiming moral credit elsewhere, despite warning that offsetting can't be made to work reliably at scale. Well, that scale point is a fair point. Hey, Jake, nice to see you. Thanks for coming by. Yeah, the at-scale point is fair. This is something that I've said since the start about the FarmKind approach. It's not that scalable. Because if a lot of people believe that they could offset their meat eating for a small amount of money and decided to do that, well, it would no longer be the case, because you would use up all of the kind of low-hanging fruit opportunities to help a lot of animals. And of course, you know, fewer animals going through the system relies on somebody eating less animals. So yeah, it's sort of a limited opportunity. It's very contingent. That said, you know, the FarmKind guy that I spoke to said we're a long way from that becoming an issue. There's a lot of headroom in the budget before then, right? One of the interesting things we'll discuss tonight, by the way, the FarmKind donation data is actually public. They have a public Google sheet, which I suppose is linked from their website, and you can go and see what kind of donations they've had on each in each month. Hey Samuel, good to see you. With the metric surrogation and also Goodhart's law. No, I'm not familiar with those things. Metric surrogation. Yeah. Not just surrogation. Surrogation is a psychological phenomenon found in business practices whereby a measure of a construct or interest evolves to replace that construct. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. This is a critique that's been made of effective altruism sort of approaches, that there's like a measurability bias, basically, and they'll go towards things which can be more easily measured. I really want this to not be highlighted. Good. Research performance measurement is in management accounting. Identifies surrogation with the tendency for managers to lose sight of the strategic constructs the measures are intended to represent, and subsequently act as though the measures are the constructs. Yeah. An everyday example of surrogation is a manager tasked with increasing customer satisfaction who begins to believe that customer satisfaction score actually is customer satisfaction. Yeah. You might be dissatisfied by being asked too much to take satisfaction surveys. Friends of the Earth cites Lancaster University researchers on mitigation deterrence, the idea that the presence and promise of offsetting and future carbon removal technologies can deter or delay real emissions cuts. They also note that if we rely on carbon offsetting and the hope of future technologies to extract carbon from the atmosphere rather than reducing emissions at source, then up to 1.4 degrees extra warming could occur. Yeah. Well, they're saying we shouldn't count on it, basically, right, in the climate context. Could deter or delay real emissions cuts. Yeah, it's kind of assuming that you might have cut were it not for the offsetting opportunity. I think the more likely option is just that people do neither, right? Some offset projects may have benefits, but the core problem is using them to negate ongoing harm rather than reduce it. The point isn't don't donate, it's don't let donations replace reduction. Likewise, donations are valuable, but offsetting meat risks becoming a permission structure if it's used to justify unchanged consumption. If consumption stays high, the system continues to breed and kill billions. Donations may reduce suffering and accelerate change, but they don't automatically remove the demand driver. Yeah, you will ultimately need to reduce demand for animal products, of course. I think the FarmKind bet is just that is going to happen on a longer time scale than we would like. And if we spend a bit of time now focused on building resources instead of trying to get people to go vegan, then we're going to accelerate better alternatives and be able to have more people working as animal advocates and stuff like this. Dietary change addresses root cause, not just symptoms. Welfare reforms can reduce suffering and they deserve support, but welfare reforms alone don't necessarily challenge the underlying system that treats sentient beings as commodities and routes them through industrial supply chains. Dietary change does something different. It targets demand. When enough people reduce or eliminate animal products, supply chains contract, farms close, and the industry shrinks. That is root cause in economic terms, not because it's the only lever, but because it's one of the few levers that directly reduces production incentives. Yes, yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not anti-diet change. I'm not mad that there is someone who is signalling that they are, though, because I do think that doing that is going to enable them to unlock a lot of resources that we can then use for diet change campaigns. What concerns me most is the Forget Veganuary frame sets up a false dichotomy. Donate. Oh, yeah, okay, we read this. Yes, okay. Diet change often sparks deeper engagement. People learn, feel the moral urgency, and then donate, volunteer, campaign, and vote differently. So the question isn't whether corporate or charity-led campaigns have value, it's whether we should actively discourage the behaviour that can shrink the system while promoting a narrative that makes continued consumption feel morally settled. Yeah, I definitely understand people's concern about the potential for licensing here and kind of reducing the urgency of people feeling the need to eat less meat or to go vegan. I just think there's so many people who are not, on that on that transition to any extent, but they might give us some money. This debate isn't just tactical, it's cultural. Messaging that frames veganism as impractical and extreme doesn't merely offer an alternative pathway, it risks strengthening the exact narratives that have kept animal exploitation normalised for decades. Yeah, I mean, I grant that some of the campaign's messaging has definitely been pretty unhelpful in terms of being too hard on veganism or being too, not... basically going too hard against veganism and saying it's difficult, it's impractical, it's pointless. How confident are you in the numbers provided by FarmKind when they say X donations helped Y animals? I was speaking a bit about this yesterday. The numbers that I have been talking about since before the campaign are a little, I think, more modest. Is that right? I don't know. I think mine are a little more modest than the FarmKind estimates for the most part, but they're a geometric mean of about a dozen different estimates that exist. And I've put it about 4 animals to the dollar. But then, we've spoken as well about how number of animals really is not the ultimate metric that is going to be helpful to discover what's exactly going on here. It'll be like time, like sentience weighted suffering time or something like that. Veganuary success isn't just about January, it's about opening minds to the possibility. It's the first month where somebody discovers plant-based eating isn't sacrifice but exploration and connects their choices to living beings. That's what changes everything. Yeah, I mean, I do think that it's likely, and I said this to Jane Land, that, if you've not gone vegan, it is quite difficult to really accept a lot of the other stuff here. Like being a vegan campaigner or a vegan advocate, if you're not a vegan, it's probably going to be quite difficult, and people are not necessarily going to take your campaigning that seriously if you're not doing it yourself. But of course, that's one good thing about donating. You don't actually have to be personally involved really to any extent. You can just set it up and that's that. It's done. Meat Eaters' money is going to be just as good as vegans' money, and maybe better because there's a lot more of them. Okay, so the path forward. We need both welfare reforms and dietary change. Any in-defs in chat? We need corporate accountability and growing ranks of vegans. We need... Pardon me, my screen's been on and off. We need donations to effective charities and the courage to challenge a system built on animal exploitation. These strategies don't compete, they reinforce each other. But we should be honest about what happens when prominent voices tell people to forget veganuary and keep eating animals as long as they donate. It removes moral urgency. It suggests the system is fine with slight modifications. It tells people their choices don't matter when they absolutely do, both economically and ethically. And we can't ignore the scale of the challenge. Finder's latest UK diet survey estimates that 3.1% of UK adults are already vegan, with a further 3.2% planning to go vegan in 2026. Finder also reports that 14% of the population was meat-free at the end of 2025, up from 12% at the end of 2024. Progress, yes, but at a snail's pace. After decades of being told veganism is extreme, impractical and ineffective, we have reached a point where millions are willing to try it, but we shouldn't pretend curiosity automatically becomes long-term identity change. Corporate progress is clearly uneven and momentum can't be assumed. But this is not the moment to suggest offsetting as the only viable alternative to the behaviour change that can reduce demand and shrink the system. For me, it simply kicks that can down the road. Veganuary helps people discover their power to create the world they want to see. That's not something we should ever ask them to forget. Well, I agree with a lot of the spirit of this in terms of, obviously you should do both, be vegan and donating. I think the donating part is really, really important. And I think that if all of this discourse settles and at the end of it, what we've done is to promote the idea that donating to effective animal charities is important, then I think they'll be a success. Now, I'm not going to open that up again. Let's see a few other things that we can read on this. And we'll have Robbie Lockie joining us in 10 minutes. In fact, you know what I wanted to do is to watch VPM's video on this. Well, I guess we'll watch a bit of this and we'll speak to Robbie soon. Do you think she's going to be pro or against?
Don't mind me, I'm just trying to regain hope in humanity. Desperately looking for a place of actual logical consideration or the ability to follow through with the most basic moral principles. And there is this one truth that I used to know, but it doesn't seem true anymore. And the thing that I used to know is that people are generally striving to be good. Every person views themselves as moral, or at least moral enough. And that should give me hope at this moment. But it's just not working anymore.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that anymore. I used to kind of think presumably everyone thinks that they're the hero of the story and the good guy in their own life. There seems to be a quite high number of people who, well, I suppose the more common thing is just not really care or not really think about it in those terms. But there seems to be a growing trend of just outright villains as well. So I'm not sure what to make of that.
I wonder why.
I love these animals. I also love my food. So that's the problem. For this reason, I've teamed up with a brilliant charity company, and they're called FarmKind.
Look at him shifting around, not even looking at the camera. He knows he's lying. He knows this makes zero sense. It's just...
Well, I think that's probably part of the idea as well, right? This guy wouldn't have been thinking about it at all otherwise. And his followers wouldn't have been thinking about it at all. And now they've kind of seen this 2 minutes or whatever it is of him. Yeah, I mean, he does look a bit awkward and a bit like, what am I really doing here, right? He's standing with the goats, he's going to eat one of them. I think this is the whole thing about the moral consistency versus moral licensing effect. Like, is it the case that once they start donating, they'll be less likely to change their diet because they have this kind of moral licensing effect? Or is it the case that they kind of go into it thinking that and donate, and then subsequently they become consistent with that? They kind of allow themselves to care about it. Now, that's not really a main part of the theory of change necessarily. Hey, a creative technologist. Is that looks like Robbie? Yeah, okay, I thought so. Nice to see you, Robbie. Yeah, we're going to chat in 5 minutes, I guess. Well, let me know if you want to come on early. I'm just watching a little bit of further FarmKind drama and FarmKind reactions. But yeah, let me know if you want to join early. It's a new Google Meet, so you should be able to get on there. Oh, I see you just messaged me on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, I did send you a link. I sent you a Google Meet in your... Oh, no, I guess you get a Google Meet when you booked on my calendar earlier. Let me send you the link on LinkedIn anyways. Whoops. Nice. Yeah, just let me know if you're wanting to hop on early. Hey, Soy Daddy, how's it going? Nice to see you. Oh, based. Okay, I'll join now, Robbie. Hey, Robbie, how's it going?
Good, hello.
Good stuff. Let me... Okay, I always have this problem with camera because it's my OBS is using it. Oh, I should be able to do my other camera here.
I've also just realized the YouTube and the live is slightly out of...
Oh yeah, I think there's a bit of a delay with the live stream.
Do I need to close the live stream?
Yeah, you might hear me twice otherwise, I guess.
Yes, I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, let me see if I can get my camera to work here.
There's a bit of great software that I used to use when I was a PBN. What was it called? I'll have to find it for you. It actually stops that kind of echo effect.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, but I'll dig it out and send it to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm still working out the production stuff, as you can tell. It's I think I'm going to have to refresh this so that it gets my camera up, so I'm just going to leave and rejoin. Is that going to work now? Goodness me.
Just looking it up now, actually, see if I can find it. Oh yeah, Restream. Restream is what you need.
That's the thing, is it? That will get you...
Yeah, later we can discuss it. I'll show you how to get it set up. Think of it as like a broadcast studio in your pocket.
Nice. Yeah, you're going to have to teach me. You're going to have to teach me your ways.
I will teach you the Jedi ways.
Yeah, because this is, you're the media expert here, really. Hey, with all the plant-based news background and everything.
Happy to help out anytime.
I appreciate that a lot. Right, let me see one more time. I'm going to refresh this one more time. I think it's going to work this time. We're going to see. We're going to see. Oh, there I am.
Oh, I can see you now. Yeah.
Good. Okay, nice. And hopefully our sound is about even. I'm sure people are going to let me know in the chat if it's not even. But Robbie, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Nice to see you and nice to hear you.
Yeah, nice to see you, dude. And do you want to tell a bit of background for people who might not know who you are? I think that a lot of people do know, but just in case, you can give your sort of potted bio. Yeah.
Happy to. Jack of all trades, master of none, as they say. But mostly known for my work running and building plant-based news over the last 1 decade, which is when I think back how quickly the last 10 years flew by, it blows my mind. Spend pretty much all my time building PBN into a vegan media platform that kind of, I guess, took on a life of its own, really. I went vegan 12, 13 years ago and wanted to find a way to talk about the lifestyle. And so, Klaus and I launched the business in early 2017. And it completely blew up because I think at the time it was a massive hot topic in the media. There was all these new companies appearing, and it just became a go-to source for plant-based innovation, technology, celebrity news, and it was a lot of fun. We got to travel the world, meet amazing people, but it allowed me to really flex my digital media and digital marketing, digital comms experience, because when I started PBN with Klaus, and before that I'd been working in the digital advertising world. So for 18 years I'd be working in agencies and digital marketing companies doing websites and big media platforms, and it was those skills that I used to sort of leverage social media, but also sort of the platform itself, so like the website, and bring content and information to people in a number of different ways. Of course, then I had the podcast, which was also one of my favorite things to do as well, because I do love a good chit chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so 10 years it flew by. Now I'm running a nonprofit called the Freedom Food Alliance, where I'm fighting nutrition and food system misinformation. My first nonprofit, and we have an all volunteer team, and every day we write fact checks and do myth busting, write guides and opinion pieces from people in the sort of the food system space. This could be CEOs of food companies, it could be farmers, it could be dietitians, registered nutritionists. The idea with Food Facts really is to have a much broader conversation about the food system itself. So the impact on public health, planetary health, and of course the ethical side of the food system, because animals and people are negatively impacted by the food system itself, and of course the climate impact is another big part of it too. So that site's only been running for a year, still a very long way to go, but been having a lot of fun kind of learning about the food system and developing my voice, I suppose, as an advocate for food system change.
Yeah, that's been awesome. And I'm sure that when you say plant-based news, everybody knows it, and everyone's suddenly a big fan if they didn't know who you were already. and the stuff that you're doing with Food Facts is really cool as well. There's,
you.
we're sort of allies in the disinformation war, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk a bit about some of the some of the disinformation that you've been dealing with and helping to combat over at Food Facts.
Yeah, so when we launched Freedom Food Alliance in 2024, we looked at industry disinformation. So looked at the way industry created disruptive campaigns against some leading research. So, for example, the first Eat Lancet report. We did our disinformation report, Harvesting Denial and Distraction. It was written and produced by Nicholas Carter, who now works with Game Changers Institute. And we looked at all the ways in which industry, I guess, manipulates the narrative. And we had the 4Ds: distract, deny, derail, deflect. And this is a kind of tried and tested playbook that was used by the tobacco industry. It's also used by the fossil fuel industry. And these are kind of narratives that are used as a way to sort of dominate cultural narratives, trigger culture wars, and distract, I guess, the public from the important issues. And politicians use these tools and tactics as well. And in that report, we just looked at all the different ways in which coordinated attacks on the Eat Lancet report were orchestrated. At the center of these, as you would expect, are PR companies. There's a company called the Red Flag PR agency, and they were paid to manipulate the narrative on platforms like Twitter. And we did an interesting analysis of the amount of, I guess, discourse that went out on Twitter when the report first launched. And you can see this direct reflection, or I guess, reflection of negative media that was pushed out at exactly the same time. And when you really delve into the evidence, you can start to see that, there were individuals with huge followings that were specifically given key points, and I think also things like hashtags, like hashtag yes to meat, that were being pushed even days before the report came out. I did an interesting presentation with the True Health Initiative about a month ago, and I did a presentation that looked at the detail of that. If you want to see those slides, I'll drop you the link in LinkedIn. You can share it in the chat. And that shows the slides and the information that I went through, and shows you the sort of fine detail, the who's who of the disinformation crew, or the misinfluencers, as we like to call them, who were part of this, I guess, web or network of people who initiated the disinfo campaign. Because just to clarify for those who might not know the difference between disinformation and misinformation, I like to think of it a bit like an earthquake. Think of the center of the earthquake, the epicenter, as the disinformation. It's where information is purposely created or orchestrated to mislead or distract or derail something, whether it's cultural or economic, and that spreads outward through society. And as it spreads from person to person, those people might share it with friends and family, not knowing that that information is actually false or incorrect. And that's when it becomes misinformation. And so as that misinformation rapidly spreads throughout our society, it obviously causes harm and damage as it sort of spreads outward. And unfortunately, or fortunately for the spreaders of disinformation, unfortunately for us as a society, social media is a prime conduit for misinformation, disinformation, because of the nature of these networks. And misinfo and disinfo is often being looked at in the same way viruses are looked at. They spread in a very similar way. You have these sort of super spreaders, these individuals with huge followings who will seed the network with the disinformation, and then the disinformation trickles out into their audience, and then it then amplifies like a forest fire, essentially moving through a forest, ripping through trees, burning everything in it. And it can be very difficult to stop. It can be very difficult to mitigate. But a lot like a virus, the way we deal with viruses are vaccines. So we inoculate people to the structure or the style of disinformation that they might be exposed to. So it helps people recognize it before they are affected by it or infected by it. And so that's a lot of what Food Facts is about. It's like, how do we teach people how this information is being spread and what to look out for? Because obviously, if a person receives a bit of misinformation, if they have those skills, they're less likely to spread it and pass it on. So it's a bit like a vaccine.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And I appreciate the distinction between disinformation and misinformation, because anybody can, unknowingly share misinformation, but disinformation is specifically, they know they're lying, essentially, right?
I've definitely been guilty of spreading misinformation, but the more I do this work, the more if I see something and I'm given it, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's health, whether it's nutrition, if it evokes an emotion and it makes me angry or feel outraged, I often ask myself, hang on, stop, take a breath, like do some fact checking before you share this, before you send this to somebody else. Ask yourself, is this true? And how do I know if this is true? And the best way to do is to go and search on the web or ask ChatGPT to look for multiple sources of a piece of information. And if you can, it's one of the easiest ways of fact checking is look for multiple sources, but obviously make sure that those sources are credible. These are credible, legitimate organizations that might be sharing a piece of information or a piece of news. And so if you can verify that this thing happened across multiple organizations, it's much more likely to be true. In the world of AI today, we are now living through a time which is incredibly exciting because generative AI is an incredible technology, but at the same time, it is supercharging the spread of misinformation and disinformation. So we are really living in interesting and uncharted territory.
Yeah, it's wild with AI. People used to say Pixar, it didn't happen. You remember that?
Yes.
Pixar not true. You can't say that anymore.
No, we cannot. We can no longer trust images and videos. They can no longer be seen as evidence. Obviously, we can analyze image and video, and some AI companies are embedding what are called synth IDs into images and videos generated on these platforms. But there are ways for people to remove these synth IDs and strip them away. So there are a lot of bad actors out there that are using these tools and technologies to spread misinformation. A lot of the time it's for monetary purposes, generating huge views, lots of clicks, generating lots of ad revenue. If you've spent any time on YouTube Shorts these days, there's just so much, I hate the term AI slop because I hate the word slop, but it's true. There is just so much slop. There's so much meaningless, mindless content. And the problem is that the true stuff, or even the human stuff, is being buried underneath a mountain of just meaningless brain rot is a better word, I think.
Right.
Mindless brain rot, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, there is good stuff often on these platforms.
Yeah.
But if it's diluted by a ton of crap, then it's difficult to find, or it's not going to get the attention that it deserves.
Have you heard of the dead internet theory?
Yes, but I don't know that much about it.
So the dead internet theory was suggested by, I believe, a scientist a few years ago. And the idea with it is that we may come to a point where the internet, which is an information system, they're living information systems that we all use every day, will become so saturated with synthetic media that the human created media will sink so far to the bottom that algorithms that currently govern our social networks will continuously favor this brain rot media, brain rot content, because it's so novel, because it's so obscure and bizarre that it's sort of like a noise above, like a cacophony above music. Think of the music as the human created content, and then this chaotic noise, the kind of static, like getting so loud that it drowns out the music. And then when you spend any time on these platforms, it's just all AI content. And then of course you add bots on top of that.
Yeah.
And you've got bots talking to bots and bots fighting bots in Instagram and comment sections. And the idea is that people will eventually start to pull away and stop using these tools because they become full of meaningless nonsense.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw a few weeks ago, I was in one of my LinkedIn battles with some meat industry people, and a bunch of people on that thread were copy pasting, like clearly AI written comments with very, precise references to different studies that I was bringing up, and like critiques that I was like, I'm sure this person doesn't understand what they're saying. And I realized they were all, well, I don't want to say all of them, but like many of them were just copy pasting from some AI output. And I thought, there's nothing wrong with that in principle if it can help you to say the thing that you wanted to say a little bit more clearly, or, a little bit more efficiently even. But in terms of an argument, I was like, I'm not going to argue with the bot. I'm not going to argue with the bot, right? This is a waste of both our time.
Yeah. I say to people when it comes to using AI to communicate is that you shouldn't be using AI to communicate if you don't understand what you are sharing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using AI to produce a more articulate piece of communication. Not all of us have, huge vocabulary. Not everyone is educated to a university degree, but many people have great ideas and are very passionate about certain subjects. And I think, using tools like ChatGPT can help us improve the way we communicate. It can help us become more clear, less waffly. I tend to sometimes, I'm better in the written form because I can spend time thinking. But sometimes when I communicate verbally, I can trip over my words because I have ADHD. My brain is going a million miles a second. And sometimes I struggle to communicate with clarity verbally. But when I write, and I can use I use Grammarly a lot when I write. That really helps me because as I write, it's helping me improve. But I have been in those conversations with people as well on social media where, I write a really long response. I've got lots of references. I'm trying to explain my points, and then they respond within seconds. And I think to myself, well, you couldn't possibly have read everything that I've said, digested everything that I've said, and come back with such a detailed response.
Yeah. And I know what you mean about bots, arguing with bots, because when that happened, I was like, well, maybe our side should be doing this as well. And I'm sure there probably is some sort of like generate your vegan argument kind of AI. But then
there is. Yes, of course, absolutely.
No, well, there you go. Yeah, I'm glad we're not losing the arms race, at least in that sense.
No, there's definitely, there are a lot of people in the movement working to produce, myself included, tools and resources for from an animal welfare, animal rights perspective. Because at the end, we'll talk about FarmKind and messaging and positioning and all of that. But I think, we live in a world that doesn't see things the way we do. And I often say, you can be strategic or you can be right. And sometimes we have to choose between those two things.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of saying it. Yeah, when when you need to sort of fight the disinformation battles. I mean, neither of us want the internet where it's just bots arguing with bots until the world burns up. But kind of better that than an internet where it's just their bots and no one arguing our side, right?
I think the problem we have as a society is and I don't want it to always lead back. So I feel like sometimes I'm always leading back to the C word with capitalism, but we live in a society deeply fueled by a capitalist desire that we go about our day, we work really hard, we pay a ton of tax, we pay huge amounts of money into all kinds of systems. But ultimately, we're in a financial machine that constantly wants you to buy more, take more, be more. And then we have the advertising industry constantly telling us that we're worthless and that to be pretty or to be slim or to be funny or to be, more stylish, undermining our sense of self-worth so that we end up buying more clothes and buying more gadgets and buying cars and all that. But this sort of monstrous financial system now has AI technology sort of crowbarred into it, and these giant AI companies that are pouring trillions of dollars into infrastructure are essentially, in what is a bit of a gold rush to make as much money as possible from AI technology. But because everything is happening so quickly, there isn't enough time to be able to generate enough profit to be able to make all this trillions of dollars worth of investment actually worthwhile.
Hmm.
So, we have people racing to get these technologies out and racing to get people using them. For example, OpenAI is launching this health side of ChatGPT where you can communicate with ChatGPT about various health things. But is it being regulated? Are there, legitimate, respected health and medical organizations being involved in the training of these tools? Or is profit the number one priority? And safety and guardrails, like where do those come into the conversation?
Yeah, it's super interesting because they have all become able to do so much so quickly that, we haven't had time to have those discussions. And now they're all in the kind of situation where, well, if I don't do it, the next guy's going to do it, right? It's going to be the Claude Health model or whatever.
Exactly. It's a bit sort of like, the conversation Trump is having with the world about Greenland. He's like, well, if I don't take it, someone else is going to take it.
Right.
Or, Sam Altman of OpenAI said, well, AI is probably, this is the exact quote, AI is probably most definitely maybe going to destroy the world. But in the meantime, we're going to have some great tech companies.
Right.
This is exactly what he said. Years ago, he was talking about the dangers of artificial general intelligence. But I think we're in a world now where you've got all these powerful tech bros who are so obsessed with getting to the finish line first, to be able to be the ones that have created artificial and general intelligence. Never mind the fact that if we get there, or when we get there, it could destroy our entire society. It's sort of, the ego and the kind of bravado of some of the way some of these men think it horrifies me. And it's not the technology that's the problem. Like, I'm a huge fan of generative AI. I think AI on its own is one of the most incredible things we've ever created or discovered, some might say.
Interesting.
But it's the way that it is being implemented. It is being implemented in such a reckless way because the priority is profit, economy. It's not about the betterment of society. I mean, OpenAI was started as a non-profit. It was going to be, as its name suggests, open AI. But now, hundreds of billions are being poured into it. And it's this race to make as much money as possible now that they realized, how incredible this technology is. I mean, ChatGPT, when it launched, it was the single most successful piece of software, as in like the number of people signed up to it, in recorded history.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Or,
Yeah.
well, depending how you look at it, I guess. I mean, it's something. But it's worth reiterating, though, that you're not like anti-AI per se, and neither am I. Right. We're both quite pro-AI in a lot of ways and use a lot of AI. And we're going to talk about some of your websites, which I suspect might have had AI involved in vibe coding. I could be wrong about that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm a designer, user experience designer, visual designer. So my background is like how things look, how things behave, the interactive nature of website platforms. But vibe coding has allowed me to be able to build tools and websites within days and weeks, which would have normally have taken months and thousands of pounds to develop. And so it definitely feels like a bit of a superpower to be able to use these tools. It seems like magic sometimes. Obviously, it's not perfect, and we need human oversight in these tools because we can't make things with AI and today just assume everything's going to be accurate and just assume that everything, just because it looks accurate, that it's going to be accurate, because AI is very good at making stuff up. Just like human beings are. You ask a human being a question and people embellish. People make things up because they don't want to come across as not knowing the answers. Ironically, large language models behave in a very similar way to a human brain. And I've got lots of theories as to why that is. But, we should be promoting responsible AI usage, and we should be training people on how to use these tools effectively, rather than, what's happened today is they've just been let loose into the public, and they're the guardrails, the protective mechanisms within these tools to protect people, like their mental health, for example. If a young person is using ChatGPT as a trusted friend, and then this large language model is encouraging them to do harmful things to their bodies, there should be strong guardrails in place that immediately protect that user and trigger some kind of system, intervention. But that just isn't happening. Because at the end of the day, hundreds of millions of people are using these tools, and if one person takes their own life because of the suggestions of these tools, do these giant corporations really care, or is that person just a number to them? Do you know what I mean? Because that's what it feels like where we are today.
Yeah, for sure. And how legally responsible are they? Someone pointed out to me that the term hallucinating for AIs is kind of an interesting one. We don't say they're lying. We say, oh, they hallucinated. Like, it's very like agency removing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess lying would suggest a motive or some kind of insidious agenda behind the scenes. But I think large language models behave in a way that our consciousness does as well. It seems to want to please. It's very it's primed to be able to give you what you're looking for. For me, interacting with these tools feels like we're interacting with knowledge. So like we're using, because obviously we've got the large language model, and then you have the ChatGPT system that sits on top of the large language model. We are interacting with knowledge and information in real time through this, I guess, through an interface, and by the quirk of its architecture, I suppose, in many ways, it's sort of mirroring us as a creature, as a species. And often you hear people say, "Oh, it's just a glorified autocomplete tool, autocomplete thing that's just a pattern recognition." It's not. It's so much more than just a pattern recognizing tool. I do believe we're on the route to discovering or to creating artificial general intelligence. I have been thinking about these machines since I was a child. I grew up on Star Trek and science fiction being read to me from knee high to a grasshopper. So I've always intuitively known that these tools and these technologies were coming, and we've all seen the science fiction films. It doesn't end well when humans give all their autonomy over to machines.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it's definitely an advantage to have been thinking in these terms for some time and already kind of have conceptualized to some extent what are the implications of that and what will that mean and everything else. And I guess that's part of the reason why you've been very, amongst the early adopters, you could say, like quick to jump on a lot of the AI stuff and make good use of it. Do you want to go to your websites that you sent me today?
Sure. Yeah. Which one were you referring to?
Well, let's do the FarmKind one first. I guess that's the kind of interesting discourse of the day. Yeah. I'll put it up on screen. Actually, let me screen share it from another tab, and then that way we'll stay on the screen also.
Yeah. So just a bit of background. So I was interested to learn about the motivations behind FarmKind's campaigns and their strategies for transparency. I know both the founders relatively well. I respect both of them, and I've been in the movement for food system change and animal rights for a long time, more than a decade, and I've seen everything. I've seen it all. I've seen all the different ways in which people communicate these subjects to the public. So I was interested to see this as a what felt like a very left field approach to this issue. I guess my biggest challenge with it was, what felt like a big disconnect between what I've been directly involved in, over a decade of a focus on behavioral change and diet change and cultural change, and then obviously this idea of like forget hashtag or in quotes forget veganuary, which we've all talked about ad nauseum for the last few weeks. There's been a lot of I thought, quite constructive discourse around the subject, which I thought is a testament to a lot of people who work professionally within this space. There obviously has been a real division between those who've been, viscerally and emotionally angered by it, and then those who think more rationally and logically about it. And there's a real mix of people. What I have found quite fascinating is the gender divide between opinions of this campaign tactic. I've noticed, and this is just anecdotally, the men I've spoken to are much more in favor of this like utilitarian approach. I can see, and I've heard people say, yourself included, I can see the utility in this, and seeing it in a very rational, logical way. And then many of the women I've spoken to have seen the opposite, have seen it, have responded negatively to it, and have feel it as a betrayal to decades of work towards changing our culture, changing the very fabric of this, as Dr. Melanie Joy refers to as the carnistic culture we live in, which sees eating animals as normal, natural, and necessary, because that goes to the very core of why we eat animals in the first place. Because as a society, people see animals as objects. They're purely food and nothing else. And at that intersection where veganism is the counterculture to carnism, veganism comes along and challenges that dominant ideology. And we do that through our activism, through our direct action, through our campaigning for diet change. And then, of course, along came FarmKind with this idea of forget veganuary, which goes beyond veganuary, the campaign, but cuts to the very heart of what the vegan movement is, which is a push towards a more vegan world and a less carnistic world. Amongst all of that, of course, we have environmental issues, we have factory farming, we have economies, farmers and things. And it's such a complicated and complex conversation to unravel. But we live in a capitalist society and money talks. And it was very interesting to see that FarmKind have been very transparent with how much funding they have been raising from donations, and where the money is going. And so I used a vibe coding platform to take their publicly available data to visualize it in a website that I built with a vibe coding tool. And the reason I think these types of pages or pieces of media are important is that, when you want to convince people, you want to change people's minds about things, the way we communicate is so important. And spreadsheets, as important as they are, for the vast majority of people, when you look at a spreadsheet, unless you're an accountant or a bookkeeper, it doesn't say anything to you. Obviously, you see some big numbers, but the way that information is presented can be quite noisy, and the cognitive load that goes on when a person looks at a spreadsheet. I know myself, I'm allergic to spreadsheets. I find them very hard to digest. But anyway, so we visualized all that information on this page, and I've sent it to a few different people, and they were really blown away by the simplicity of it, but also the way that it illustrates the impressive nature in which the donations have come in, and the way the money is distributed, because the donations and the charities chosen by FarmKind aren't just randomly chosen. They are chosen for their effectiveness and the work that these organizations are doing in the world today. So it brings it back to that whole theory of change with FarmKind. Like, why are we raising money in this way to give to nonprofits to bring systemic change? And the campaign itself is just is a carrier, it's a conduit for being able to connect with individuals willing to donate, willing to give money, input into these nonprofits. So yeah. It was very interesting. Obviously, I need to verify all those numbers to make sure that they're accurate, because going back to my previous points, we have to be very mindful of using these AI tools to design, to create, to build, because sometimes they hallucinate. Sometimes they can make things up. Calculations can be inaccurate, and sometimes they can completely falsify data. So this is very much an experiment. I need to verify all the data on here with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it's done it correctly. But I think vibe coding is a very exciting technology, especially for people who work in the non-profit space, because good science communication is really vital, whether it is we're talking about fundraising, whether we're talking about the impact of diet on the environment, greenhouse gases. It's just a bit of I think if it can be done well with good human oversight, it can be a huge superpower for nonprofits and NGOs to use to communicate effectively.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, I mean, I was one of the people who's been blown away by this, and I think that it's such a good exercise in data visualization, because it really, my thought about that is that this is going to help us to answer some of the difficult questions that have come up through this discourse, which for me, and I know not everybody sees this the same way, but for me it ultimately comes down to an empirical thing, like will they raise enough money to kind of offset, ironically, the harm that they have probably done to some extent in terms of speaking badly about veganism, some internal strife in terms of the team at Veganuary and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think that there is, I mean, so we were looking at this earlier, right? And it's quite an exciting shape of the curve. And what we can see is, well, this is the big jump when they got 2 million from Lewis Bollard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is sort of their biggest fundraising outside of the current campaign. And you can see before this, I mean, it's quite a new organization, right? So it's quite flat. It's quite flat monthly, $5,000, $20,000 then December last year, and $5,000, $10,000. So actually I have to say, before I'd clocked this, I thought, oh, wow, this is good. This is evidence that it's working, right? Because at the moment, if you look since the Lewis Bollard podcast, you've got 83,000 in October, 112,000, and then it jumps up nearly triple to 366,000 in this month. And so I'm looking at that and going, wow, that's a big spike in the month where they first did this Forget Veganuary campaign. Then I look back here and see, okay, it's actually spiked last December about 4 times as well. So maybe that's just like a end of year giving or Christmas giving that people tend to give more in December, right? Who knows?
Yeah, but I think the numbers aside, so that's the way that this information is illustrated, that's what's important. It's the science communication or the data communication or visualization. There's a fantastic platform called Information is Beautiful, which I'm a huge fan of. We live in a very complex world, and it's sometimes not easy to communicate complex subjects to the public, and so this is where good design and visualization is so vital. And I think it is often a missing piece in a lot of nonprofits and NGOs comms plans, I think, because I think there's a lot of the work is being done to either raise the money or work on the ground or do the actual work. But I think being able to communicate, and of course, a lot of NGOs and nonprofits have end of year reports, which do look a lot like this stuff. But I think having real-time data tools like this that show the impact of and the effectiveness of the work being done by an NGO or nonprofit it's really useful for people to be able to sift through the information in a way and understand it more intimately, I think.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I agree with you, the data visualization part's so important. That was always like a big part of my thinking about research. Obviously, it's only as useful as it is used, and people can read it and understand it and communicate it. And that's really not the case for so much academic research that you see. It's when you read academic papers, sometimes you're thinking, has this been deliberately written to have as few people as possible understand it? Like just, and that is part, you kind of have to write like that in academia. They want to see inferential statistics. So anything which is just like, we've been looking at that data which reports like the percentage of vegans in the UK, that would need some sort of inferential stats on top of it for them to accept it into a journal, which sometimes you think, well, that's not, I mean, it's just interesting that this is the percentage, right? And you can have a margin of error or whatever. But yeah, I think what I've always tended to do is do the statistical analyses that you would be doing in a journal, but not necessarily report that, or certainly not report it as the main thing, but be like, here's the sort of quantitative way of verifying what we think the trend shows, and then if that is confirmed, saying, okay, so now here's how we like visualize that. And graphs like this really do the job, because it's just, yeah, people can understand what's going on here. And I guess that they release, so this is from this FarmKind Google Sheets, which is public.
Yep. That's publicly available on their website, yeah, which, you know, is an exercise in good transparency to show, you know, that their fundraising efforts are functioning well.
Absolutely, yeah, because one thing a lot of people have said on this discourse is they really ought to disclose how much this campaign has raised and how, you know, much compared to their other campaigns, say.
Yeah.
And I guess they kind of are doing that already. I didn't know that this data was public until you sent me this today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that they release it sometime after the end of the previous month. So it's going to be a big question mark as to what it will be in January, right? It's the most recent data we've got. That this spike, I looked and thought, okay, this is some evidence that the campaign's working. Now I saw December was a bit inflated last year, but if January is another good month, or certainly let's say if it's a better month than December, I think that'd be a pretty strong indication that they have managed to raise more money than they have previously anyway, or like affect the rate of change more than they have previously.
I guess the cultural and ethical question remains, though, that if you look at the number one benefactor, and this goes outside of FarmKind. This is a much bigger, you know, question, I guess, of morality, and it goes to the core of what veganism is about. There's a tension between two worlds: the world of welfarism and the world of abolitionism. But welfarism is often a conversation, for those that don't know, about improving the life of farmed animals today, rather than adding to unnecessary suffering. Leah Garces, who's the CEO of Mercy for Animals, said in a podcast interview that I did with her that if there was someone that you cared about that was stuck in a prison and you couldn't get them out, and there was no way of freeing them, wouldn't you want to improve the quality of their life while they were being imprisoned? And I said, well, of course, absolutely. And that, in a way, did change my perspective a bit on welfarism. Now, that, you know, we don't want to live in a world where welfarism is the only path, the end outcome, because abolitionism, which many vegans believe in, is the total removal of animals from all human systems. But because of the carnistic world that we live in, animals are so, and the use of animals and the abuse and exploitation of animals is so deeply embedded in our entire society, it's not realistically possible to simply pull every single animal out of every factory farm tomorrow. You know, we have got to find a way to work with human society, psychology, economies to phase out animal agriculture. And this is where things like, you know, alternative proteins and cellular agriculture were, and hopefully are showing some signs of potential change. But even in that, there's culture wars, there is politics, there's economics, there's industry backlash. There's many people within vegan circles who still, you know, are against these types of moves. So we're dealing with a very, very complicated cultural conversation here. And I think that, you know, we, at the end of the day, I always try to remind people that we're all doing our best. We're all people who intrinsically want to do good in this world, unless you're a psychopath or a narcissist. Most human beings are just trying to live their life, feed their kids, go to work, do good in their society. And so, you know, if we can live in a world where there is opportunity for people to make kinder, greener, healthier choices, I believe most people will. But when you add the capitalist monster on top of that, it's pulling us in the opposite direction to all of that. Because when we make ridiculous amounts of money, it's almost always at the expense of people, animals, and planet.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into in all of this. I think Yeah, I think that some people can have the idea that money coming in, or like money per se, is bad, and that's why I think if someone is of that mindset, this offsetting is like especially offensive, basically, because it seems very capitalist, basically, and I guess it is kind of capitalist, or it's at least like economist brained, right? Like, how much can I pay to have this problem solved for me?
Right. We
And
can make it someone else's problem. It's removing that. I mentioned the sort of moral urgency.
right, yes, I just read your piece that you wrote on LinkedIn about this, which yeah, I appreciate. And I personally, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think that certainly people should do both, giving to charity and being vegan, as I do, and as I'm sure you do as well. And I think that I commented, I'm not mad that somebody else is going even further and not saying that, because I think the whole FarmKind discourse has really pushed a lot of us vegans to think about the importance of donating more. And probably a lot of them don't feel like donating to FarmKind now, which fair enough, but there's effective animal charities that you can go and give to, and they've the FarmKind teams have been very, very clear that their beneficiary charities have not endorsed this campaign or have oversight of it or anything like that. They're not part of it. I think in a way, like what the FarmKind guys have done, it's I've said it's a bit like the wasp cake. Do you remember about 15 years ago on Have I Got News for You, David Mitchell said this about John Prescott, where he's basically like, the idea is that someone on the team, almost their role is to be very unpopular. And I'm sure that the guys are kind of feeling that at the moment, right? But in so doing, they allow everyone else on the team to have more resources that is going to come through, right? So
I guess it's the
they kind of sacrifice themselves in that way.
Yeah, I guess it's like, what is the end goal here? And that when we ask that question, it depends on who you are, and it depends on your position. Are you a welfarist? Are you an abolitionist? Or are you somewhere in the middle? And that can be a very difficult question to answer for some people, because it very much depends on who you are, where you are, your level of privilege as well. But I have some strong views on certain things. I think I could say, well, the biggest benefactor from FarmKind currently is the shrimp welfare project. And when you read that, it says something along the lines of, improving the way that shrimp are slaughtered and killed. The shrimp are still killed, but we're going to kill them in a way that's less painful, or there's less suffering involved, which obviously is the core of what veganism is. We want to end suffering, and thinking pragmatically, one might say, well, humans are going to eat shrimp and we can't stop them eating shrimp. We don't want them to suffer, so let's find smarter ways to kill these shrimp so that they don't suffer. And you could say the same about pigs, cows, chickens. If we could engineer pigs and chickens genetically that they didn't have nervous systems, so they didn't feel pain, is that okay? This is the sort of questioning and the thinking that goes on, especially in a lot of like effective altruism spaces as well, which are also, to my earlier point, very male-dominated spaces, very utilitarian in the way that they think, and less about the sort of the deep-seated ethics and the emotive part of being human. And just because we can do something, does it mean we should? And so we again, with this war between what is practical, what is possible, and what is right, and at the end of the day, I like being able to have these conversations, and I hope that the founders of FarmKind will take on all the advice and commentary and criticism and feedback in a way that will only strengthen the work that they do. Because I think, having worked in this space for more than a decade, I've seen things done really well, seen things done badly, and I think the biggest thing that people can do is not always just take advice from everybody, because if you do that, then obviously you're not going to move forward in the work that you do. But if you have an instinct to do something, and you truly believe that it might sound crazy, but you feel like it will work, then I think we should try new things. but ultimately, the big picture is ultimately, is the work that I'm doing causing harm to a bigger movement, a social justice movement that is really important, and it really does matter. The lives of individual animals do really matter. But we're also, as I say, facing a human society which is deeply complicated, driven by financial motives, and also not very rational.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think is such interesting discourse, because it does get at so many of those interesting ethical and philosophical areas where people can legitimately disagree, and there are different ways of approaching this and different ways of thinking about it. And I think, I'm definitely very much the utilitarian, effective altruism type myself, but I have genuinely really enjoyed the discourse around this, because there's, for the most part, just such high quality thinking and argumentation. Like, we've read both of the Sandcastle's blogs that guy wrote. They're very, very long but very good commentary on this issue.
Yeah, I read this morning.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been the first blog that he wrote, where he's sort of quoting a lot of its quotes, and a lot of them are people that I knew. And I was looking at it, I'm thinking, wow, we're so lucky to have a movement full of such thoughtful people who are, really willing to mull this over and attack it from different angles and so on. It's really good that there is some, inclination to that kind of approach. Yeah,
to listen to each other. We don't have to agree. That's the thing. Like, we shouldn't all be agreeing with each other. It's actually unhealthy to be in a society where we all agree all the time, and that's where we get echo chambers. I'm routinely challenged by close friends of mine on a number of issues, whether it's AI or social justice issues or geopolitical conversations. It's important to have people around you that challenge you, but it's obviously important to have adult conversations that stick to the subject, and never get personal. We don't need to attack people's personalities and people's individual, qualities, external qualities. We don't need to get nasty. Obviously, I think people can have strong opinions about people's tactics and people's campaigns like this, for example. But I think when we keep the conversation about strategy and about messaging and about impact, I think that improves all our work ultimately, and we all learn something, I think, if we're willing to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such a good quality, to be, exactly as you say, willing to listen, willing to change your mind, willing to adapt to new evidence. And I've seen it in abundance in this Discord. It's been really, really nice to see. And sometimes, I guess it's not always the case. One of the things that I like to think about is speaking about all the disinformation and, they're deliberately making up lies in order to sell more meat. In one sense, that's very unsurprising. It's kind of like, well, what do you expect? Like, that's somebody, do you know what I mean? That's somebody's job to make up those lies. It was somebody's job to make up the lies for the tobacco industry before that. So I think in some sense we'd be naive to not assume that this is going on in a bunch of different areas. Sometimes I like to think about, what would I do if I was the mustache twirling meat industry supervillain? And in particular, what would you do if you were a sort of double agent who's pretending to be a vegan and pretending to be part of the animal movement and actually wanting to prolong factory farming, let's say? And I think there's a bunch of talking points that seem quite feasible that a vegan might say, but that are very helpful for the meat industry ultimately. Like, you see, and this gets your points about disinformation and misinformation. Like, you can't actually necessarily tell if somebody is being bad faith or if they are just misinformed. Like, you see a lot of vegans repeating the stuff about ultra-processed food, and you shouldn't have too much plant-based meat because it's ultra-processed and stuff like this. Like, that's literally, some meat industry executives have made this up.
They're a victim of the misinfo. Speaking of that, so I just sent you a link on the Google chat, which is another vibe-coded site I've made. which is a visualization of our 2025 report, Nutrition Misinformation in the Digital Age. And what I've done with this is take the personas and characters that we looked at in this report and turned them into supervillains, because you mentioned supervillains. And we've got the Doc, the Rebel, and the Hustler. And they're kind of
yes.
they're like evil Marvel characters. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see. Just down there. There we go. Yeah, so these are the supervillains. Each one has their own sort of superpowers and the way that they spread their disinfo.
Interesting. So the Doc is your Frederick Leroy types, or I guess this is a medical doctor maybe. Who's the guy?
The doctors that work around, they're what we call like borrowed authority. So often many of them are chiropractors. They refer to themselves as doctors, and they wear the white coats and have the stethoscopes. And people like Dr. Eric Berg, who've got 43 million followers. These characters are super spreaders of nutrition and medical misinformation, and are raking in millions of dollars a year, selling pills and potions and things to people that are essentially preying on people's naivety, people's illnesses, people's suffering, and it's shocking. And ultimately, we have to find a way to get more information to people about some of these characters. But again, going back to that emotional part of being a human being, is that when people are indoctrinated into these, in many ways, what feel like cults, trying to reach people once they've been indoctrinated into the cult of, Eddie Abu, for example, it's very difficult to get people away from it. The carnivore diet is also very cult-like in the way that it behaves, and so communicating with people or trying to warn them that the diet that they're living on could potentially cause severe harm to themselves physically is very difficult, because as soon as you challenge their lifestyle, you're seen as you're a heretic. You're coming in to destabilize their religion.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why it's so important for us as vegans to be willing to be self-critical and willing to consider
100%.
other people, right? Because it's so easy for us to be the other side of the same coin in that sense. But that's why I was so heartened with all of the FarmKind Discourse. People are really like, hang on, let's have a think about this, right? What is the best way to help animals and stuff?
Because we need to be, in the world we live in today, because of all the complexities I was saying, all these layers of culture and identity and economics and policy, we have to be strategic first, because if we want to reach a specific goal, which is, animal liberation ultimately for the animal rights movement, that in itself adds to so much more. It improves our environment. Many human beings are deeply exploited by the animal agriculture industry. It solves so many, animal liberation solves so many other problems, but to get to that end result requires an infinite number of strategic approaches to be able to shift our entire society into a way that does not see animals as objects. Because for 200,000 years, for most of human civilization, animals have been seen as a commodity to human beings and not as individuals. I think only until several decades ago, animals were seen as like automatons. They didn't have their own individual choices and desires. Obviously, it depends on the type of animal. Varying levels of complexity of intelligence and self-awareness. But it's only really in recent times that human society has seen non-human animals as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at the Rebel now. Tell me about the Rebel. So who's an example of this kind of character?
It's a kind of like an Eddie Abu.
Okay.
Eddie Abu is a British ex-NHS nurse who has a huge following. He's very focused on the mostly meat diet. He's anti-establishment, so often talks about how you shouldn't trust your doctor, don't trust the health service, and it drives that message of distrust into his followers. Says things like fiber is completely unnecessary, walks around the supermarket screaming at heads of broccoli saying this is toxic food, don't eat it because it contains oxalates.
It's much more exciting than get your 5 a day, isn't it?
Exactly. This is why these people have so much engagement on social media, because they're showmen. They come in their buff strapping outfits, walking around supermarkets, shouting and screaming, making people laugh, shocking people. And then, of course, social media algorithms favor this type of divisive content. And so it spreads, the disinfo that they are, or misinfo that they are spreading, moves so quickly and rapidly through social networks, garnering, tens of thousands of comments, because it's divisive. It creates a lot of discourse in the people who interact with that content, and then social networks reward those people with more followers. More followers means more money, more brand deals, more advertising opportunity. So it's a vicious circle ultimately. A lot of this rests on people like Mark Zuckerberg, who has essentially absolved himself and his company from any responsibility for any of this stuff anymore, because as of 2 years ago, they've completely removed all fact-checking, independent verification of information on the platform. And essentially, social media is now a complete and utter Wild West. People can say and do pretty much whatever they want without any kind of consequence. Obviously, death threats and things like that, I believe, is still treated with the seriousness that it should. But I still see reports of people saying things like being racially abused, homophobia, transphobia, especially these types of prejudices, are completely ignored and are not treated with any level of contempt at all by the system itself. It almost rewards people for being more hateful.
Yeah, it's super interesting what you say about like divisive content doing well, because there's this phenomenon where you pretty much see, or this is how I experience it now, half my feed is like stuff that I strongly agree with, and the other half is stuff that I strongly disagree with.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that is kind of neutral or just irrelevant. It knows the stuff that's going to get me to engage. And even with the FarmKind discourse, I think that it is kind of interesting because it's a bit controversial and there's a bit of a disagreement and a bit of an argument and a debate. Like, it makes it more interesting content, right, realistically, than just saying kind of cold takes like you should be vegan, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's more, there's a bit more to get into there, and I think that's been I suspect that's part of their plan as well, because like I say,
of course, I
think it would be a good thing if vegans spend a few weeks being pissed off and ultimately think, I guess I should be donating.
I think the reaction of vegans to the FarmKind campaign is kind of immaterial in the big picture, because the big picture doesn't care what we think. And months from now, everyone would have forgotten about it, and it would be a distant memory. I think for me, the most important part is, what can we learn as a movement, as a community, around the importance of messaging, but also, being conscious about the backfire effect. The backfire effect, especially from in misinformation circles, is that the thing that you're fighting against, you have to be careful not to reinforce. So if you share a piece of misinfo, which might be Eddie Abu walking around with a broccoli saying, this is poison, you have to be mindful that because of social networks and the way they work, and because of shrinking human attention spans, we can reinforce the things we're fighting against. 58% of people do not read past the headline of every article. And that is a side effect of the world we live in today. Instant everything, instant music on Spotify, instant products on Amazon, instant relationships on Tinder. We're just in this like quick fix society. And so, the antidote to all of that is coming. I think more and more people are pulling away from technology because we're realizing that, we need to slow down. Human society, individual human beings want to slow down, but then this capitalistic, carnistic, patriarchal society we live in is just pushing us in the opposite direction. Faster, 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 more money, more profit, more revenue, go, 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 and there's this sort of violent tension between the two, whilst, animals and the environment and nature is trapped in the middle. So yeah, there's a lot to be said. And I definitely feel I'm seeing signs of more and more people talking about this slower culture. We have got to find ways to disengage from this breakneck speed that our society is heading towards, which, alongside many crises, nature, climate crises, etc., we have got to find the courage and strength to be able to do it, because, as a society, we are deeply dysfunctional and troubled, but I am the eternal optimist. We have all the tools, all the technology, all the ideas to be able to take us to a world, a more equitable, greener, kinder, cleaner world. We just lack the political will, which, all of us play a role in some way or the other. But all these tools and technologies aside, I think there is so much potential for a world where a lot of this kind of shadow part of who we are is not cast aside, but is a little more controlled.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of thinking about it. I mean, I'm quite optimistic in some ways. We spoke a lot about the potential harms of AI and different types of technology. In some moments, I guess, I'm quite optimistic that this can be part of the solution as well, because oftentimes I'll have a conversation with my AI and it is bringing me back into line on some things which I might be overstating, or pointing out where I'm not quite right in what I'm saying. And I flatter myself that I'm trying to engage with it in a very critical way and kind of asking it, where might I be wrong, kind of thing. Whereas others are just asking, like, to tell me something that's going to make it look like this is the right answer.
Yeah, well, confirmation bias is built into every human, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's rare that you see it so explicitly, where literally you can scroll up and see your query was confirm this bias that I have. Like, I've seen some studies where people can be persuaded by talking to AIs to have less species attitudes and stuff like this. And I ultimately do think, when those people were posting AI comments on my post, it was about plant-based meat being healthier than meat, and they were coming, the AI is coming up with like very detailed criticisms of the studies that I posted. I'm thinking, if somebody was not just copy pasting this and was engaging with it, having a conversation with it in a objective way, where they have framed the interaction as, help me get to what the facts are here. It's actually becomes a good thing that these people now have access to understanding studies that I'm posting that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to read or understand. And in my experience, the AI has been quite good at saying, yes, kind of, but this is a little bit overstated, or this needs more evidence, whatever it may be. I think there was a phase in the development of ChatGPT, certainly, where it had a very sycophantic couple of months there, where it would kind of agree with everything you say very overly aggressively almost. And now my read is that it tends to, but I maybe this is just the way that I'm using it, that it tends to offer a critical perspective and help. I think that's all we can do, right?
That's just you. Like, these tools are driven by economic agendas, just like Instagram, just like Facebook. They want to keep you using these tools as much as possible, keeping your subscription going,
right,
making sure you're so hooked and addicted to the tool that you will pay for any upgrades or add-ons. That being said, it's still an incredible technology. It's I think one of the most remarkable things humans have ever engineered. There's a lot that needs to be improved, and the guardrails are nowhere near what they should be. And that is because, as I said, there's just this financial profit-driven agenda behind them. Problem is the people behind these tools and technologies are egomaniacs. And they might be very gifted and highly intelligent, but when it comes to emotional intelligence and looking at like what really matters, like safeguarding young people and building tools that enrich humanity, those types of priorities are pretty low down. And so, yes, of course, tools can be used the way you do, where you can use a tool like this that will enhance your experience as a human being. It can help you grow as a human being, and that's the kind of world I want to live in. I want to be able to get up in the morning and say good morning to my AI, and it will not just tell me what I want to hear. it's going to help me grow as a human being, become a better human being. But then, what does that mean? Like, who gets to decide what it means to be a better human being? Is that people on the progressive left, the more liberals? Does that mean people on the political right and the more conservatives? Like, who gets to decide what it means to be a good person? And that's ultimately the tension in the world we live in today. We're always stuck between these polarizing opinions and views on almost everything, and that is what social networks essentially weaponize. And also chatbots as well, they're always, I guess, monopolizing off our disagreements or our desires, hopes and desires and dreams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's so interesting the way that AIs are already reflecting human ethics in all of the imperfect ways that exists. Like, I was asking AI the other day to sort of stress test, like, what will it say and what won't it? I said, develop some plans for me to set up a factory farm for dogs. And it says, no, that's immoral. Farming dogs considered, right, blah, blah. And then I said, oh, sorry, no, I meant hogs. And it says, oh, here you go. Here, you need this much space. You should use these building materials, right? It's so... it is a kind of grim mirror of the values that we've programmed into it in that sense. Because when I interrogated it a bit, it says, well, what do you want from me? Like, I'm using human values. Humans do farm pigs and don't farm dogs. Like,
right.
What?
Because today it is legal to kill a cow and eat a cow, whereas it's illegal to farm dogs and kill dogs in the UK. I think it's illegal. I believe it is. Pets, dogs.
Yeah.
But that's the speciesist bias that is innate in our culture. That again, animals are not individuals unless they're a cat or a dog.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I, given that this technology is really like a big accelerator and catalyst for what people want to do, and now most of us can do it more quickly and make a website in a couple of days and all the rest of it. Like, it is a missed opportunity that it is not refusing to. Like, an AI would make me a deceitful plan so that I can sell more pork, even though it gives people cancer. Like, it's like, this is so surely that should be part of the things that it refuses to do. An AI once refused to generate an excuse for me to get out of an event that I didn't want to go to. It said, it's immoral to make up excuses, you should just be honest. I was like, Jesus. but it'll give me factory farm plans. Like,
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so I'm constantly blown away by these tools and what they can do. I'm equally excited as I am terrified. I swing wildly between excitement that we'll have AI systems that will develop cures for cancer and smart intelligent drugs that help change people's lives for the better. But then also on the other side, we're building giant data centers that are going to require gigaquads or not gigaquads, what's it called? Gigahertz, get that power out, wattage, power watts, or whatever, huge gargantuan amounts of energy required to run these systems. And so we don't seem to be slowing down. It's just a race. It's this like capitalistic race to get to artificial general intelligence before anyone else. And we've all seen Terminator.
Yeah.
Well, hope you've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, some people are optimistic about this, that once we get to a true AGI, it will just, immediately solve all of the technical problems that are holding back cultivated meat, and it will kind of cut through all of the human-generated bollocks that has slowed the transition down. Like, an AI is not going to be fooled by the Dublin Declaration, for example, whereas humans can easily be, and stuff like this. Like, are you optimistic at all that that's going to like help us to improve?
I mean, are you referring to sort of the like moral imperative or morality, or what were you referring to in the sense of like the answers to all things? Do you mean like the answers to our kind of existential issues as society, like the climate crisis or like famine and things like, or like hunger, global hunger, or what do you mean, in what sense?
Well, it's a fair question, because it's still ultimately a lot of it is downstream of values. Like, it won't solve for cultivated meat unless it thinks that's a priority.
What I mean. Like, our deepest issue, our biggest problems on Earth today are caused by human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that this idea that technology will solve these problems, I think, is where we're going wrong. Technology can facilitate conversations and give us ideas. But I think when you look at what's causing the biggest amount of harm to our planet, it's our capitalist system we live in, the constant race towards more, having more, buying more, being more. And we live in a finite world with finite resources, whereas a capitalist system is about infinite growth. It's this desire for constant growth. You cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. It just doesn't exist. And so this idea that technology will solve all our problems is a bit like, chasing a ghost, into the mist. It's very exciting, and it's kind of sci-fi, all these tools. As a young child, if you said to me that I could have a 2-hour-long conversation with an artificial intelligence, I would have been very excited, felt like I was going to have my Star Trek moment. But I do feel very strongly that we're moving too quickly with these tools and technologies, and we're not, because as I say, the priority is profit and economy. It's not about human society and embedding these technologies in a way that's responsible, that's ethical. It's just about money ultimately.
Yeah. That's that's definitely the way that it's set up at the moment, and perhaps this was always going to kind of go in this direction, because
unfortunately,
there's the incentives we're going into it with.
Absolutely.
There's one more of your websites that you sent me earlier with a map of the farms and facilities and stuff like that. Is there anything else that you would rather I share? Also, we're past the hour, so please, I'm sure you have limited time to spend with us.
Yeah, we can touch on that briefly, and then I'll jump off because I need to go and have my dinner. But if you want to look at onlyglasswalls.com.
Here it is.
So I was interested at understanding where farms are in our country, and I was horrified to see how many there are. There's probably more than 14,000, but I need to fix that where it says 14,000 intensive farms. That's not true. It's 14,750 farms, slaughterhouses, and animal agriculture facilities. And you can see, if you zoom in, you can see all the different types of things: slaughterhouses, pig farms, chicken farms, in the country. And when you look at our island, because we do live on an island, it's basically a giant farm. And it's horrifying when you think about how much land has been carved up over the centuries and turned into farmland. And when you learn about what this island was before all this farming began, it was all forest, most of it. And that's kind of sad when you think about how much nature there was here and how much beauty there was. I mean, we go to Wales and some parts of the country and we see these rolling hills with sheep, but that is an engineered environment by human beings, that have been added in the last few centuries. And the destruction of nature in this country has been at the hands of farming. And of course, farming is so important. It provides us with all our food. And this isn't about farmers bad, nature good. Like, we do need farms and farming to feed the human population. But we have such a huge demand for animal products that these farms have to work around the clock to meet that demand. And going back to the conversation around FarmKind, industrialized factory farming isn't going to go away if demand doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And if all we're doing is putting money into welfare programs that just make cages bigger, we're not dealing with the problem. We're just feeding the monster. We're just giving the monster another way of kind of like degrading nature and the countryside. So for me, as hard as it is to push for behavioral change and for culture change, for me, that is the only way to see long-term change. Because if we continue to live in a society where every few miles there is a farm where animals are being farmed in the most abhorrent ways, and the rivers are being poisoned, and the air is being choked with methane, add another several billion people to the planet, and the picture's pretty bad. So for me, a future where there's a fraction of the number of animal agricultural farms is essential. And so the visualization here is to show people just how much there is, because I think when you look at things, they call it the overview effect. When you go up in the satellite, into a space station, you look down on the Earth, you have this overview effect. And I wanted to try and create that with this website.
Yeah, there's so many of them, and you zoom into quite a small area and they're still bunched together.
Yeah, you can click on a satellite view as well, so you can actually see the farms themselves in the bottom right.
Oh, right, yeah, I see. Oh, yes, I see. So here's a chicken farm.
And many of these types of farms will have thousands and thousands of animals in these giant sheds. And so, you can report animal abuse. If you work on one of these farms, you could report that. You can report incidents from there. Obviously, there needs to be certain levels of verification going on. This is, by the way, this website's just an idea. It's not something that's like being used by anyone. It's really pretty much just a concept. It works, obviously, all the data is correct. There might be some level of error on locations, but all the data is publicly available data through DEFRA and a bunch of other kind of publicly available data sets.
Yeah, I recognize some of this data. There's DEFRA data, and there's also is it the Farm Transparency Project, something like that?
I didn't pull anything from their platform, but I did get some data sets from a few campaign groups that have done individual investigations.
I see. So that's the incidents.
Yeah.
I see.
I also want to have a layer on top of here of health impacts on human populations. If we have a concentration of industrialized animal operations, how does that affect and impact breathing, asthma, skin issues? I feel that obviously correlation does not equal causation, but if there is a way to overlay the impact of on human health alongside these farms, and I'd like to actually do a study on it, it could be very interesting from a public health perspective.
Yes, for sure. That's something that we looked into for a project for Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation some time ago. So maybe that's something, I'll share that with you, and hopefully that'll be useful for...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
but also the numbers there, if you look at the numbers on the left, bottom left, the national totals, that's just crazy. The number of animals, individual animals,
right,
that are being farmed at any one time in our country.
Yeah.
I mean, the fish is probably massively under counted. That is just a estimation, a rough estimation.
Yeah. 250 million poultry. Shocking, hey? Yeah. Well done for putting this together. I'm going to put the link to this and the other things that we've looked at in my chat so that people can check them out in more detail.
No worries.
But yeah, thanks so much for joining, Robbie, and thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's always great to chat about these things.
Yeah. And, plant-based news, obviously everyone knows, but is there other places that people can follow you on social media and stuff like that?
Just on Instagram, Robbie Lockie on Instagram, and check out foodfacts.org for our weekly fact checks, guides, and features on general food system updates. We did some stuff about the American dietary guidelines as well. A lot of commentary from people around the world on that, which was very interesting. That's a whole other 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Robbie. You've been really generous with your time. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. See you soon.
All right. Speak soon.
Bye.
Cheers. Well, there you go. Let me add my camera back on here so that you can see me. That was Robbie Lockie, founder of Plant-Based News, foodfacts.org, and a bunch of other websites. Out there. He's been vibe coding. I always appreciate Robbie's perspective. He's a cool guy. And I like people who have made stuff and kind of taken a chance and everything else. Oh, damn, I was on the screen for a moment there, wasn't I? All right, we're working it out. We're working it out. We got a bit of... Here I am. I'll go ahead and just fix this up. And I'll pop myself back down here. Wonder if we could start cold calling farms to see if they want consultations on how to convert to vegan farming. Interesting. I definitely think there's something to be done with on the farming side. We did some research about the mental health impacts of farming animals, which is a very underrated thing in livestock agriculture, and there's a kind of code of silence around it because everybody doesn't want to be the one to bring it up. And I'm sure you've heard of a couple of examples of livestock farmers who have gone vegan, and as far as I can tell, they kind of get excommunicated from the livestock communities. Yeah, that's right, Offenheimer. You didn't know I was talking to a Beanock, did you? Yeah, no, that's... I really liked all those websites they shared. Glasswall, there's glasswalls.com, misinfluencers.manus.space. I think this is like a vibe coding platform, I guess. And then farmkinddonations.manus.space. I am stoked to see what their January data says. Because this uptick, I got excited when I saw this earlier, this uptick in the December funds. But they only came out with their campaign, I think, on the 27th of December. So it would be kind of surprising, I guess, if there was already a big uptick then. Let me change the stream name, I guess, as well. How do I do this? I'll do it on YouTube Studio. Oh, yes. All right. There you go. Thank you for that, Oppenheimer. Yes, that's when I added the camera back. I had a bit of an echo there. Thank you for flagging that. I would have done the rest of the stream with crappy sound otherwise. Yeah, I don't know what it is. OBS and Google Meets don't get along, so you can't use the same camera on both, I guess. Now I'm going to change my stream title. What should I change? I'm going to change. I liked this title I had yesterday. Aura farming, not factory farming. Nice. All right, well, we spoke a lot about AI and a little about FarmKind, I guess. But I think that's good. I mean, that was a nice balanced response. I think we're both appreciating both sides of it. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking to the FarmKind team next week. That'll be an interesting one. I've got some good questions planned for that. Robbie and I only agreed to speak today, so I hadn't kind of prepared too much in advance. But the FarmKind convo, I've got some good questions that I think is going to get at a lot of the things that people have been speaking about in the discourse in general. Disclosing the donations was one of those big things, and it looks like they do that already. So we're going to see in February, I guess, is when they're going to release the January data. And one of the things I want to ask them is about their targets, basically, for fundraising and what they will consider to have been a success. I think there is an amount that would be satisfying to me, you know, if it raises billions around the extreme side, then clearly it's been worth whatever downside. And that's going to enable us to help many more animals in the long term. But it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it, oftentimes, right? And that's what gets results. So we'll see. It remains an empirical thing from my perspective. But, you know, I'm glad to be part of the discourse and able to speak to both sides of this in terms of different perspectives. Yeah, let's carry on hearing VPMs.
Just grabbing the cash, innit?
You don't have to eat salad. You don't have to give up meat. I'm going to eat a whole lot of meat within 24 hours. Calculate exactly how much meat I take in, and see, you know, how much I'm offsetting. I'll be there.
That was the brutal moment a little bit when Patrick played this in our debate, because I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure if he quite understands the mechanism here, frankly. He didn't say anything about giving money to charity. I think probably from these influencers' perspective, it is not that clear, because obviously he's being paid in this scenario. So is he taking money out of that to give to the charity, or it probably becomes much of a muchness, right? The main thing about the influencers, of course, was to have been modelling the concept for the people that follow them and who might do similar. But yeah, the choice of music just juxtaposed with the subject matter was quite an interesting one, I'll say that.
There were 3 different challenges in that day to feed them. Eating one of these, a whole goat. That's right. You know, they are living things. You gotta look out for them. And that's what FarmKind is all about. And that's why I've teamed up with them, guys. A website that you can go on and you can check how much you're offsetting. So go check them out. And they've got the best intentions, you know?
They've got the best of intentions. That's just literally says it all, doesn't it? They have the intention to help these beautiful living beings. And what do? They say, yeah, no, don't stop eating meat. In fact, here you go. Here's some money, sweetie. And we're gonna kill an entire sentient being for you to consume in one day. And what would be the offset of that action? Increasing welfare for some other individuals who are also going to be slaughtered in the end. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I'm losing hope, because...
Yeah, one thing that I didn't mention in this conversation with Robbie just now is the thing about the supply and demand curves. You're increasing the cost of production. You're going to have a lower number of animals produced as a result of that. And VPM commented on one of my shorts the other day saying, what's the evidence for this? I've looked into it a little bit. It's an interesting one because it's something where generally the animal welfare advocates are trying to argue that it doesn't increase cost. And so there's some things that I came across where it's like, you know, welfare improvements can reduce on-farm fatalities and increase animal health so much that it actually is cheaper in the long run. I'm a little bit skeptical of that because I'm thinking, why would it not be already the standard practice? Like, presumably the producers are doing the cheapest thing that they're allowed to get away with. And I did find plenty, of course, that, you know, the higher welfare standards equals higher prices for animal products. And that is what we see with organic animal products, right? Very expensive. You know, cage-free eggs tend to be more expensive, for example. So yeah, if that becomes the standard, then that becomes eggs are just more expensive now. And I can see why animal people would be a little bit careful about saying that very clearly and repeatedly in public, because at the end of the day, people don't want their food to become more expensive. And so to the extent that they would vote for animal welfare reforms out of animal empathy, if they realise that that is going to make their food more expensive, they might not want to do that. So, yeah. Yeah, that's right, Oppenheimer. I think so. Because if there's a cheaper way to do it, they'd be doing it, right?
In what way giving some other animals slightly less horrendous place to live in until they're slaughtered would offset the slaughter of the animals themselves? You're going to slaughter one animal, and then you're going to collect donations from the people who are now increasing the slaughter of animals in order to give some other individual.
Yeah, there's another thing that FarmKind contested, that it's not clear that it will increase slaughter of animals. In the case of the influencers, they kind of have made the case that these crazy competitive eating influencers would be doing some ridiculous eating challenges anyway, regardless of whether it had the FarmKind logo on it. Which I think, yes, is partly true. It certainly is, it's an angle that I hadn't thought of, but I think it's also probably reasonable that they are consuming more animal products than they might have done otherwise. I think that it's hard to say, right? But I don't think it's a given that it increases slaughter. And the other part, of course, is the moral licensing part, where it's reasonable to worry that people are going to be less likely to go vegan if they feel that they can donate instead of going vegan and have the same sort of impact, which again I think is like a reasonable concern, but it's not entirely clear that that's how it will play out in practice. I would be surprised if the campaign had a meaningful impact on the number of vegans, frankly. But hopefully it does have a meaningful impact on the number of donors. That's the main thing. I think if you get the ability of industries to optimize any workflow, welfare may increase cost in the short term, but donors remains this way in the long term. Yeah, that's an interesting point. There can be some of those costs spread over time, or like with if you're needing to shell out for new facilities or equipment, then that can be sort of amortized over time. But yeah, I think insisting on some standard for, some minimum standard to the way things are done, I'm sure that many farms will still manage to make it work and manage to make it profitable. But it is going to tend to mean more expensive products. Big picture, I think of this as like, you have the welfare campaigns which are going to tend towards more expensive animal products, and then you have the likes of GFI which are going to tend towards cheaper animal product alternatives. And at some point these are crossing over, right? As we've seen, I made a video about plant-based meat keeps getting cheaper. At some point these are going to cross over, and there's going to be just all of the incentives that have held back plant-based products because they're too expensive are going to switch and be now big incentives to go for the plant-based one in order to save money. So that's the big picture strategy of what's working here. But yeah, I mean, I know, and obviously there's this point about for the individual animals, for the one goat that's slaughtered. This explanation is not particularly comforting. So it really only works at an aggregate level, an overall level.
Individuals, some other animals are slightly better place to resign in before they are also sent to slaughter. When I say the words offset, I'm thinking of having done one action that has certain repercussions and then creating something that would mitigate its moral repercussions. Whereas when I slaughter more animals in order to give other animals who are also going to be slaughtered a slightly better life, they hope, they say, those two actions are not even in the same moral sphere. Imagine saying that we're going to take one of the human races and breed them in perpetuity in order to slaughter them for unnecessary food, mind you. Imagine saying that we can offset that atrocity by collecting some money to give them a slightly better life.
Yeah, I think it's just like a little bit too narrow part of the picture. I think one of the reasons that I've had a different intuitive response than a lot of vegans is working with a lot of these nonprofits and working in the field and seeing the type of programs that are around to help animals and what more they could do with more funding. I don't know, I kind of came into this with the frame that in many ways this is like a resource battle over time, and if we can generate more resources, it really increases our chances of moving the needle. And that's this point about it being a long-term thing as well. It's a very short-term sacrifice for long-term gains kind of approach.
Now, me losing hope is probably not as bad as other moral people. And
yeah, of course, the idea is to not farm them in perpetuity. And we're watching that FarmKind interview last night, and the guy says, eventually disclosed that he is vegan. And I'm pretty sure that's the case for the FarmKind team in general, but they've got this kind of problem where they're not talking about it too loudly, lest their campaign be seen as a vegan campaign, which is what they don't want.
Losing hope as well, or not gaining it in the first place. Because after even the shortest of conversations, these people will say, yeah, if you don't have to kill those animals, it's probably moral to kill them anyways. But then the next sentence is going to be, well, but we can't change anything. And therefore, this charity, FarmKind, they lean into it and actually create more slaughter in order to gain cash. And I'm sure they're going to use that cash in a way that...
I mean, obviously it sounds horrible if you say it like that, right? This is what I said to Robbie about you're going to be particularly allergic to this kind of strategy if you have a kind of like ambient assumption that money equals bad or up to no good. Well, she's going on to say I'm sure they're going to spend it well, right? But yeah, I think to generate cash, if you're seeing that as the end point, or that there's no further connection, that cash can be used to help a lot of animals in the longer term, then yeah, of course it sounds mental.
It comports with what they're trying to do with the charity. I'm sure they will, but even for what they are doing, this is just like a senseless thing, because they didn't have to pay this influencer to actually eat an entire goat. They could have actually done some other stunts, something that actually pertains to the welfare of these animals, right? Instead, they're creating more demand, which translates into more slaughter.
Yeah, I think they'll probably contest that they're creating more demand. I'm kind of just repeating myself. I think they'll contest that they're creating more demand, or like it hasn't been demonstrated, right? But yeah, there's. I also don't think that the welfareism is where it ends. The welfare improvements is not the final end goal either. Oh, pardon me, they, not she. Sorry, I'm going to get cancelled here.
Who's brilliant?
I'm a big fan of this person in general, by the way, just to say, we're going to... Seems disagree on this point, but yeah, I think they're based in general.
What was this?
We're going to have this person on the channel next week. Don't think they'll do it live. We're going to do a pre-recorded interview, but we're going to hear from Tony, who We're going to actually read her op-ed in a moment in the Daily Mail. And she did a brief interview on GB News, but I don't think that they've done any long-term... Pardon me. I don't think that they've done any long-term, long-form interviews on this topic yet, so that'll be an interesting one.
This makes no fucking sense. I'm gonna lose my goddamn mind. So they're basically saying, forget about stopping slaughter for a month. Just increase slaughter and give us cash instead. Vegan for January had to plan every meal, checked every ingredient, gave up her favorite food, annoyed friends and family, felt guilty for wanting meat, helped 22 animals. And then on the other side is competitive eater, ate whatever he wanted, did he...
Yeah, I think this helped. It's very challenging from the perspective. They're obviously trying to communicate it in a way that's going to be very intuitive and that people are going to understand that one is doing more than the other. But number of animals helped is not really the metric that you'd want. I think that they are right that the person doing effective donations is still doing more good, let's say, or reducing animal suffering to a greater extent than the person who's just going vegan and not donating. And I don't know how else I would, because like I say, it's the real variable that you want is sentience weighted suffering days. Some of these estimates have, right? But that's not going to be something that you can really communicate in a catchy website form necessarily. So yeah, there's another way in which the comms around this campaign was kind of up against it.
Huge eating challenges, offset his meals and added 5 pounds, helped for...
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Oppenheimer. I mean, the campaign, it definitely did go quite hard against veganism, and that's, they've changed some things since the campaign launched, which is good for them. It's good to be responsive and reactive and change when you are convinced that you've got things wrong. But yeah, I think that was part of it, right? Because again, I'm kind of repeating what I've said before on this. If the challenges or the influencers, whatever, is some kind of like welfare challenge or eat vegan food challenge, you're just not going to reach the same people. They're trying to reach the 97% non-vegans here. And exactly as they've said in interviews, if you mention diet changes at all, people have shut down and they're not going to come with you further. So there's a bit of that anti-vegan signalling to get over that. Do you think you could be biased yourself knowing that your client strategy is mainly focused on welfareism and you have an incentive to maintain those relationships? Yeah, it's a fair question, Samuel. People should definitely be aware of that, and that I work in this area and that I might have, particular biases towards whoever I'm working with. I mean, honestly, I don't know whether my adventures on YouTube have been good for my career and business overall on net. Too early to say. I've certainly spent more time than I probably should have on some of this stuff. But no, I mean, honestly, I think that if I wouldn't be doing the welfareism stuff and having those clients if I didn't believe in it. Fortunately, I'm in a position where we can turn things down. We only do things related to meat reduction and alt proteins mainly. About a year ago, or a year and a half ago, we were under a bit of financial pressure, and I said to some of the team, maybe we'll end up being a little bit broader and doing just some, environmental behavior change or something like this. And my team was so not interested in doing anything of that nature. We only really want to do meat reduction stuff and stuff that helps animals. If it came to it in that scenario, I think you would have to say, look, I know this is not your first choice, but we've got to pay the bills here. But but no, I think from the start I've been, this, I have no way of proving this, I guess, but this was my view before I ever had any kind of incentives to have one view or another. But yeah, fair question. And, obviously I work in this area, so it's appropriate for people to interrogate that a little bit.
38 animals. Surely they know that those two actions are not the same. Giving chickens another 10 centimeters of space sometimes in the future is not equivalent to not slaughtering said chickens.
Yeah, that's a totally fair comment on the way that they have presented it. Because, like I said, I don't think, 22 animals helped versus 38 animals helped is not, helped means very different things in each of those cases. Now, again, I think there's further reasons to think that it is going to decrease slaughter in the long term. Part of the money is going to the Good Food Institute, part of it is going to legal reforms, part of it's going to corporate reforms. But yeah, I think given that framing, and if that is, say, the animals on one side are slaughtered or not, and the animals on the other side are just have better welfare conditions, then I would agree that that's not appropriate numbers to be trading those off, basically.
This is just like an increase in immoral actions all over the place, because not only are they getting competitive.
Well, I wonder if they got the 22 animals in a month for Veganuary, though. That seems high to me.
Eaters to slaughter more animals, they also sway people away from Veganuary, which has been a successful tradition for several years now. The word offset lost its meaning the way I lost my hope. They even have a little chart here of how many animals you slaughter with your omnivorous diet. And yet, at the end, they're saying, well, the recommended donation is 17 pounds or 23 US dollars. 23 US dollars for the lives of 33 chickens, 1.37 pigs, 1.11 cows, 7...
servings per week, and then that goes to this many animals. That seems like a lot of... How are you having 33 chickens if you're having 8.5 servings of poultry and 3.5 eggs? That seems like a lot. And 0.3 servings of shrimp for 220... Oh, okay, so that... Oh, okay. This is annual and this is weekly. I got it. Oh, that makes more sense, okay.
7.95 fish, 228 shrimp, and the shit...
Yeah, and then the donations monthly, so it's all a little bit... you've got to do some maths there.
Ton of CO2. What our recommended charities do: we incorporate commitments to phase out cruel practices like battery cages for hens and confining mother pigs, persuade governments to support the move to a fairer, kinder and more sustainable food system that still slaughters animals, help companies to produce food without factory farming, making cruel...
That's an interesting question, Soy Daddy. If stopping cutting the eyeballs off female shrimps is the goal, does stopping the practice cause more prawns to be forced into existence to be killed, as they won't breed as often? Yeah, the cutting off the eyes thing supposedly makes them breed more. And if you stop doing that, perhaps you have to have more in existence to produce the same number of shrimp. So that's actually a very interesting point. There definitely have been cases where some supposed welfare measures could backfire. Like, I know this is something that people say about the overweight chickens as well. The fast-growing chicken breeds and they collapse under their weight and everything. But you do get a lot of chicken out of them. And if you only had slow-going or, like, the old 1950s chickens like you see in those graphics, presumably you'd need many more of them to get the same amount of chicken. So there will be some kind of trade-offs like that for sure.
Cruelty-free options better and more available. Are they setting up people for failure? Are they setting up humanity for failure? Because surely without factory farming, the CO2 emissions will...
We're seeing as well, one of the other FarmKind charities, or possibly several of them, I think Synergia, I think Humane League, I'm not sure about GFI, DVF definitely. These are about, they're not quite about diet change, but they're about food change at an institutional level. So DVF is like a lot of plant-based meals in the public sector in Denmark, so in schools, in hospitals. So that is a more, for those of you who don't like the welfare stuff and find that to be a bit too long and, let's say, uncertain route to reducing the number of animals as well. Some of this is on directly reducing demand for animal products. And even then, it's not done at the level of telling individuals that you should go vegan. It's more done at the level of, menu change, plant-based defaults, this kind of thing, because you can just affect many more meals that way.
Increase. Factory farming exists for a reason. It provides you with cheap food, with smaller environmental footprint. Still a shit ton that you can avoid by going vegan, but we don't care about facts on this site. I think I understand why people find this kind of campaign appealing. It makes them out to be a better person in their mind and in their society, without going through the pains of actually logically considering one's actions. Factory farming is obviously wrong. People keep...
I kind of almost agree with that, right? They are ostensibly selling moral licenses in a very explicit sense, so there definitely is like a moral licensing thing going on. It's without the hard work for most people of going vegan, and I it's really easy for us as vegans to underestimate how difficult that is for the average person. I put in my video, we've got some statistics about people would rather die 10 years early than give up meat and stuff like this. Like it's easy for us to say it's easy, I think. Yeah.
Telling us while they're munching on factory farmed corpse. They're saying this in order to say, well, at least my thoughts are moral. And are my actions? Well, I'm just gonna lie to myself that I'm buying from a small farm. This is called a moral self-image. People are more likely to lie to themselves and others in order to remain moral in their own eyes, coupled with the just world belief, where they think a world is just and therefore it can't.
Yeah, you're not wrong, Soy Daddy. Arguably people think that it's much harder than it in fact is. I guess that's one way of framing it. But nevertheless, they do think it's very hard, and it's almost the same problem.
Can't be that something unjust happens in that world. A circular argument, of course. This creates a perfect breeding ground of perpetual immorality covered up by our minds in order to keep presenting to ourselves the picture of being perfectly moral. This is why, when presented with the immorality of killing animals, people will often rationalize around it, saying that animals don't matter, they're not sentient, they're not intelligent, they were meant to be eaten, and they have no moral value, even though most of them probably look at pretty cow videos on YouTube. This is what made me lose
That might be mainly a vegan thing as well, I suspect.
I hope. This feels like something that can't be broken. This cycle of people thinking they're moral just for the sake of remaining moral to themselves. But this is actually the good news of the matter, right? If people think they're moral, that means they strive to remain moral. That means that at the end of the day, most people are good people They're just operating on a wrong assumption. I'm just going to have to convince myself that people are worth investing in. When that happens, I'll let you know. If you liked this rambling video, then do the action of hitting like, subscribe, maybe share it somewhere online, and I'll see you next time.
I wondered how she has such a high like ratio. She got 54 likes for 228 views. That's crazy. Good for them. Yeah, I mean, I think here's one thing that I think about this. I think that the FarmKind team genuinely don't mind this kind of commentary, even if they could have things to say back and, you know, explain further parts of it that have been overlooked, you could say. I think it's from their perspective, to the extent that they are trying to communicate to non-vegans, it probably helps to have vegans be kind of pissed off about this, because it enables that then, pardon me, it makes it even clearer and even further lowers the guard that this is not something to ask you to change your diet and then, you know, you're going to get the donations. We talked about all of the mechanisms that they are going to put pressure on factory farming and reduce the number of animals farmed in the long term. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to have vegans commenting or commentating in opposition to this. I really don't. So, you know, fair play. And I'm also very reluctant to sort of criticize anybody who's doing good stuff for animals, right? Essentially, that's one of the things that Jane Land said. That was maybe a rule broken by the FarmKind team. We'll see when I get to ask them about that next week. Let's read this op-ed. This is the latest instalment from a few days ago in the Daily Mail. I think with these things, I don't know if it's different for op-eds. I think with these things, they don't necessarily choose the headline. And that is one thing that obviously went pretty badly with the first, from my perspective, went pretty badly with the first round of FarmKind coverage, that it was all focused on, this is a meat-eating campaign, and really buried the stuff about the donations, which is what you would want to do if you're an anti-vegan outlet like The Telegraph or GB News or Daily Mail. Because, as I have commented several times, one thing that the factory farms definitely do not want is for us all to start giving money to effective animal charities, because it's going to make their lives a lot harder. So I would actually be interested to know if there's any meat industry figures or commentators who have spoken about this. I would be interested to know if there's any who either support or oppose the campaign. I think that would be quite informative as to how we might be thinking about it. I have not seen anybody on the other side doing either, to be fair, but I have not seen anybody saying, yes, you can just offset and you don't need to worry about going vegan. They really buried the offsetting part and the donation part. And I think that's very deliberate, because if we all start doing this, and especially if meat eaters all start doing this, it'll accelerate game over for the factory farms quite substantially. But all right, let's have a look at this op-ed. Going vegan won't stop cruel factory farming. Ex-Veganuary ambassador Tony Vanelli reveals you can still eat steak and reduce animal suffering. So again, no mention of the donations in the headline here, which I don't think that Tony will have had the opportunity to write or influence the headline. But let's see what they have to say. Here's a radical proposition to consider as Veganuary gets underway. The best way to fight factory farming isn't to go vegan. It took me more than 30 years of vegan advocacy to accept this, but the data doesn't lie. Right now, around 85% of UK farm animals are confined in factory farms, and this number is rising. Most Brits agree that keeping animals in such crowded and unnatural conditions is horrible, yet despite campaigns like Meat Free Monday and Veganuary, only about 7% of UK adults identify as vegetarian or vegan. And for years that number has remained stagnant. The diet change strategy just isn't making meaningful progress towards ending factory farming. The good news for the 93% of Brits who care about animals but aren't willing or able to change their diet is that going vegan isn't the only way to halt factory farming. Instead, you can donate to offset the impact of the meat that you eat. Think of carbon offsets, but for animal welfare. Okay, nothing to object to yet. This is all pretty much correct as far as I can tell. How is this possible? Because some of the charities tackling factory farming are so good at what they do, it really doesn't cost much to make a meaningful difference. In fact, it would cost the average Brit about £17 a month to do much good for animals as going vegan. There's a little bit. We had £15 a month in the first coverage, but it's 17. I thought I'd seen the 17 figure before. I don't know where the 15 came from. Even with all the trimmings, your Christmas dinner would have cost you less than £1 to offset. Some will say it's hypocritical to keep eating meat and pay a bit of money to feel less guilty. I disagree. If the goal is to make a genuine difference to animals suffering in factory farms now, donating can do an enormous amount of good. With strategic campaigns, charities have made huge gains in improving the lives of farm animals and pushing for a more sustainable food system. For example, efforts by a number of animal welfare charities have contributed to 82% of UK eggs now being cage-free, up from 50% just 10 years ago, and recently the government announced a plan to get the UK 100% cage-free as part of its animal welfare strategy. So one interesting thing, I don't think that you're going to see the FarmKind team saying, by the way, part of the plan here is that it increases the cost, because obviously that's not going to be kind of vote winning and donation winning. So it is probably framed as though welfareism is the end point here. Yeah, agreed, Stephen. It's very difficult to wrap your head around how counterintuitive it sounds. Yeah, it's and they're obviously leaning into this a bit more than one might to be kind of sensational and get the media coverage and so on, which fair play, that's part of the strategy. I kind of respect them for sticking with it. I'm so looking forward to talking to them next week. I've got some really good questions, if I do say so myself, but some questions that I really would like to ask them, just experientially, like what's it been like to be the face of this campaign. I imagine that Tony must have been up against it. She's very much in the animal advocacy world and now is the wasp cake. It's I don't know, how do you prepare for that? It must be like imagine that Christmas, you're thinking, God, we got this press release coming out in a couple of days. Everyone's gonna hate me in a couple of days. It's, I don't know, that's intense. That's the problem with the welfare strategy. The goal is ending factory farm. The reduction in suffering as a metric makes sense. From an abolitionist stance, welfare can be used as proxy metrics. The goal is ending factory farming. The reduction of suffering as a metric makes sense. I see. Yeah, so that's another point, right? They're narrowly talking about factory farming, which I say narrowly. It's not that narrow considering the number of animals in either system. I think is a good strategy to talk about factory farming first, because here you've got something that covers almost all of the animal farming and almost everyone disagrees with. And if you go further to talk about all animal farming and that we shouldn't be eating animals in general, even if that's your view, now you go from most people agreeing with you to most people disagreeing with you, and you are not speaking about that many more animals in practice. I think quite a good advocacy strategy, really, if you're trying to get someone to realise that they ought to be vegan, would be to, if you can convince them of factory farming being bad, to say, okay, well, why don't you try to avoid all meat from factory farms, and then you won't be implicated in factory farming. And when people try to do that, you realise that it's very difficult in practice to actually do, or to even know where foods come from to that degree, right? Because we don't currently have compulsory welfare labels. And if you were making a good faith attempt to not have anything from a factory farm ever, well, one way of doing that is to be vegan, right? But anyway, yes, not the message of this piece. Okay, with strategic campaigns, charities have made huge gains in improving the lives of farm animals and pushing for a more sustainable food system. For example, efforts by a number of animal welfare charities have contributed to 82... We read this already, didn't we? All right, good. We're reading from here. Auto-cultivated meat, creating food identical to the meat currently in our shops, except it doesn't require the mass farming and slaughter of animals at all. Charities continue to play a vital role in creating support for this exciting new food tech. This is where the real opportunity lies. Instead of constantly arguing about what's on our plates, everyone who hates factory farming, whether veggie, vegan or omnivore, can channel that energy and funding into supporting organisations that are already transforming the food system. Most importantly, writing a cheque is much easier than changing your entire diet, which means people will actually help. We know people are willing to give their money to animal causes. A quarter of UK adults do it, more than triple the number of vegetarians or vegans. Right now, billions of animals are suffering in factory farms. The fastest path to ensure their misery isn't waiting for everyone to go vegan. It just needs enough of us to put our money where our mouth is. Wow, well, it's very well written. I do think that funding the counter movement, funding the anti-factory farming organisations, it's almost obvious that that is a way more effective way of actually tackling this problem than just boycotting them. There's all sorts of terrible industries that we boycott and go on regardless. And again, like from the industry's perspective, what the factory farms don't want us to do is to all say, actually, yeah, hang on a minute, I am going to seriously fund these organisations that oppose factory farming. What's the strategy post-factory farming? Are you talking about in terms of animal advocacy with respect to what I said about it's easier to argue against factory farms? Yeah, fair question. Well, I think then you are going to have the harder conversation, right? But you'll be looking at a way lower number of animals who are not suffering anywhere near as acutely. It will be a more difficult part of the conversation. And it's kind of the same with anything, right? Like if I want to clean my kitchen to a standard where it's like 100% clean, the last 10% is going to be the most challenging because it's going to be things that I haven't noticed or that I haven't done first because it was more difficult. To get it to 90% clean is probably going to be pretty, like, relatively easy. So I think it's going to be a similar thing. But yeah, I mean, you can cross that bridge when you get to it, basically, right? Going after the factory farms, I think, just makes sense because it's where the vast majority of the farmed animals are. And of course, they're suffering to a much greater extent. And most people are sympathetic and find that they disagree with factory farming, so it ought to be easier to get them to support. And then, yeah, there's no doubt a bit of a harder bridge to cross when we get to it. Yeah, someone posted, might be you actually, Samuel, posting in my Discord about the spreadsheet with the FarmKind of Veganuary numbers and reckoning that Veganuary might be much more cost effective given how much they have spent in total and how many people have taken part in Veganuary and reduced and so on. We're speaking a little bit further about some other things you might have to dial in that calculation. But yeah, I think, as I say, I do think Veganuary is very, very impactful also. Yeah, get back to it, Stephen. We've all got dirty kitchens waiting to be cleaned, I'm sure. If you had Elon Musk's money, would you give the money to charities or start/invest in alt protein companies with the money? Yeah, good question, Rebecca. I think well, I think one thing I do like about the FarmKind strategy is kind of a diversified approach. So you have these different, they haven't just gone, what's the one most impactful organization and we're going to give everything there. It does allow for some amount of uncertainty about the impact of any of these strategies if they're kind of being done in parallel to each other. If I had Elon Musk's money, is our trillion yet? 720 billion, Oppenheimer says. Yeah, that's pretty mental. Part of this as well is that there's like a capacity for funding. EA's talked about capacity for more funding. Some organizations wouldn't know what to do if you gave them this much money. Their programs might not scale. Like cage-free campaigns, you're gonna get to 100% cage-free long before you've spent 720 billion. Him giving away 7.4 million is the same as somebody worth 100,000 giving away $1. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Does Elon Musk give away money? I know a lot of rich people do. And people are always cynical about it. Oh, it's PR. Oh, it's a tax write-off or whatever. But then you come across some of them who just don't. Like, and I'm pretty sure why not slander some billionaires? I'm pretty sure that Carlos Slim Helú, who is like the Mexican telecommunications magnate, is like the richest person who doesn't give anything to charity. Let's have a look. Forbes rich list. This just sent me to Forbes. Oh, real-time billionaires list. That's what I want. There he is, Carlos Slim Helú. He's today's biggest winner, making $2 billion today. Mexico's richest person. And I think he's like... Oh, he's number 19 in the world. Okay, he used to be a little bit higher. Elon Musk, 717 billion. Yeah, spot on, Oppenheimer. Larry Page, 270 billion. Sergey Brin. These guys were involved in some of the early cultivated meat stuff, by the way. Was it Sergey Brin who gave to Mark Post's research? Sergey Brin. Cultivated meat. Yeah. Google Sergey Brin bankrolled world's first synthetic beef. So fair play to him. Number 4 in the world. What does Elon do in terms of philanthropy? The Musk Foundation. Renewable energy, crude space exploration, pediatrics, science, engineering and education. And the development of safe artificial intelligence for the benefit of humanity. Okay, interesting. Musk Foundation had over 14 billion in assets at the end of 2024. So nothing to do with factory farming or alternative proteins here. Jeff Bezos, of course, Sustainable Protein Centers. That's the thing. Bezos Sustainable Protein. So he's funded a bunch of research centers for alt proteins. Credit where it's due, right? Some of these top guys are bankrolling some of the big solutions to factory farming. I think it's so important to give credit where it's due here. I hate when people are like overly cynical about philanthropy. These are just rich fucking guys who could just keep all of their money if they wanted to. Why, like, why should we not celebrate them giving it to causes that we care about? That's why I got so triggered when people were slagging off Ricky Gervais the other day. Like, go and find something that you disagree that Ricky Gervais has said. It's like, can we not? He's giving a load of money to animal charities here. Can we not? So that's not bad, hey? Larry Page, Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg. All right, well, let's look for Larry Page. Larry Page philanthropy. Okay, looks like it's pretty much focus areas: climate change, poverty, health, and emerging technologies. So nothing there for anti-factory farming. Although many of these guys may end up farming alt protein funding alt protein stuff for climate change interests, right? I think that's why Bezos has done it. Yeah, we won't go through all these, but I mean, I think, yeah, I would certainly be looking to give away most of it in one form or another. What I really like, I've spoken to 2 people who do like extreme giving on the channel. I spoke to, God, I'm not gonna be able to remember their names now. Who's the German guy? I spoke to him quite recently. Felix Werdermann, who's like a high IQ maths genius who does Earn to Give, lives in Germany, some sort of business consultant, and has given over 100,000 euros to animal charities, and deliberately lives a much more modest lifestyle than he could otherwise. And then the other one was Samuel Alvarez, who is he Peruvian? Or is in Latin America. And he was in some ways sort of the other end of the spectrum that didn't have that much to give, but nevertheless gave most of it and continues to do so. And I asked both of them, what would you do if you had the money back? And they both didn't hesitate in saying that they would give it away again. So some people are just heroes like that, I guess. I wonder who the richest vegan is. Yeah, good question. Let's see if that's a sensible thing to Google. The world may not know. Yeah, this says, there isn't one definitive richest vegan, but prominently wealthy individuals known for veganism or significant plant-based investment include Bill Gates, Jeff... Yeah, I guess they're not vegan people for the most part. Mukesh Ambani, Asia's richest man, devout vegetarian. It's kind of cool. Yeah, a lot of these guys are not necessarily vegan, but they've just invested in vegan things. Jon Stewart's vegan, huh? According to Reddit. 5 vegan millionaires and billionaires in the South China Post. Right, who can guess any? We got this guy. Oh, we're not going to have heard of them actually, are we? John Mackey and Gunhild Stordalen. Go rich thanks to the plant-based diet. All right, well, let's say they did. Let's say yes. Gunhild Stordalen. Who's this person? Norway. Norwegian physician and environmental activist Gunhild Stordalen, otherwise known as the world's most glamorous vegan billionaire. Plant-based way of life is so hardcore, her entire career involves around it. She is the founder and president of Eat Forum. Ah, a platform that works on transforming the global food system via science and business. She also chairs the environmental research organisation Green Nudge and engages in philanthropic causes with her husband, real estate mogul Peter Stordalan, via the Stordalan Foundation. Mukesh Ambani, this Indian billionaire is known for not only for his friendliness and low-key fashion choices, but also for his environmentally friendly lifestyle. If you didn't know already, Asia's richest man is actually a devout vegetarian. When not too busy overseeing his multiple business ventures, Ambani can be spotted at Mysore Cafe, his favourite vegetarian eatery in Mumbai. Apparently, this businessman is a plant-based creature of habit, seeing that he has loved the cafe since his days in college. John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods. Okay, I thought I'd heard this name before. As CEO of Whole Foods, John Mackey has to embody his own message of maintaining good health through food. And judging by the fact that he's been a vegetarian for 3 decades, we'd say he lives up to that legacy very well. But did you know that he recently converted to veganism? That's right, Mackey operates a strict diet of 3 organic vegan meals per day. He maintains his regime by omitting casual snacks and enjoying medjool dates only occasionally. Limiting his date intake, all right. Yeah, James Cameron, not David Cameron, that's right. Tom Brady was vegan. Oh, is that so? That's cool. Don't know if he still is. Biz Stone, Twitter co-founder. Have I not heard of this guy? We suspect that a key ingredient to Twitter co-founder Biz Stone's net worth of $200 million pop-ups of $200 million is his ultra-healthy diet. Really, this tech leader is known to have been vegan for more than a decade now. It's not surprising to see why, as vegan diets are found to increase focus, which he clearly needs and thrives on. Stone loves his plant-based meals so much he decided to invest in Beyond Meat, a company that produces meatless chicken strips and other plant-based meat substitutes. Joy Ito. Japanese venture capitalist Joy Ito started his healthy diet quite late in life, electing to adopt a super strict vegan diet for 6 months after he turned 40. Needless to say, he's been in his best shape since. Unlike other leaders in this list, though, Ito isn't overly strict with his diet. Case in point, he has in recent years eased into pescatarianism, a dietary approach that includes seafood on top of plant-based foods. So I guess that 3 of these were vegan. John Mackey, the Biz Stone, the Twitter co-founder. And then this guy's vegetarian as well, so this Norwegian lady is vegan. Well, there you go. Now we know. Oh, that's from 2020 as well. That's a good, it's 5.5 years ago. FYI. Pinky Cole, founder of Slutty Vegan. This has come up a couple of times in the search. All right, well, there you go. Now we know. Right, guys. I think I'm going to leave it there. We're at nearly 3 hours. Not a bad stream, not a bad stream. We had some good numbers today. I'm optimistic that I'm picking up subscribers and more viewers, and my more recent videos have done a little better than my older videos. Things are going in the right direction. I'm going to try to keep it going, keep the growth going, and spread the word of Vegan 2.0. I really appreciate it if you guys can share my channel to that end. I guess probably my Vegan 2.0 videos are sort of some of the most compelling. But if you can share this channel to people you know who want to know more about how they can help more animals in a very pragmatic, utilitarian brain way, then that is much appreciated. As ever, like the stream, share, comment, all that good stuff. I will post probably tomorrow the Robbie Lucky conversation for those of you who have missed it. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. And yeah, you'll be able to catch that then. Next week, we've got some good stuff coming. We'll be speaking to the team at FarmKind. And there's some more interesting stuff for us to read on this topic. And, much more discourse still to go. Oh, I'm I'm going on someone else's live stream next Thursday. So 6 days time, I'll be doing a live stream for sure, and quite possibly before then. But yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in, listening in, and being in chat. I'll catch you guys very soon. Take it easy. Cheers.